We open on Officer Kim Jung-kook trying to talk down a teenage Jung Yi-hyun, who is calmly sitting on the edge of his school roof. Everyone assumes he's suicidal after hurting his leg badly enough that his baseball career is shot. Fellow classmate Yoon Se-bom makes her way onto the rooftop and tells Jung-kook she's got this. She hops onto the ledge and plops down next to Yi-hyun, complaining that she's stuck at school because of him. Yi-hyun sighs that they're making a big deal out of nothing. He only came up for some air, and then some idiot called the cops. Se-bom asks if baseball is that important to him. He says it's all he knows how to do, and now he'll never do it again. What's he supposed to do with his life? Se-bom looks supremely unbothered and shares she's never been good at anything, and she's fine. She reminds him the future is full of possibilities for them. You've got nothing to lose, she says as she holds out her hand. Yi-hyun scoffs but lets her help him up. Like me, Se-bom finishes as she freaking pushes him off the roof onto the inflatable safety mat below. But he smiles when he hits the mat. Above, Se-bom explains to the open-mouthed cop that she made sure to push Yi-hyun so he'd fall onto the safety mat. Cut to her in handcuffs running over to Yi-hyun, asking him to tell the police to let her go. Do you want to date? Yi-hyun asks instead. 12 years later. Gunfire and sirens sound while the Special Operation Unit, SOU, of the police force swarms a building. Adult Se-bom helps carry in a wounded officer and yells at the newbie to begin treatment. He diagnoses a collapsed lung and hesitates before plunging the needle into the man's chest. When the officer starts convulsing, the terrified newbie begins chest compressions. The officer stops him and sits up, taking off his medical vest and admonishing the newbie for jabbing the clavicle. Se-bom deducts points, calling the new recruit slow and indecisive. Officer Sung-young recalls their own training years ago. Se-bom had unhesitatingly drove the needle into the fake victim's chest, except he wasn't wearing protective gear. Sung-young notes they wear these protective vests now thanks to her decisiveness. Meanwhile, a motel staff member investigates a strange banging in one of the rooms. When no one answers, he lets himself in. He's pulled into the room and the door slams closed. Ominous zombie-esque sounds ensue. As Yi-hyun drives. Yi-hyun arrives at the motel, which is now a murder scene, wearing a baseball uniform. Yi-hyun is also a cop and works alongside Jung-kook. He and Jung-kook are assigned to the motel case and begin investigating the scene. He opens every door and even peeks under the bed. Jung-kook thinks Yi-hyun is messing with him when he calmly orders, "Come out." Then Jung-kook leans down and sees the blooded culprit staring back at him. The man sits docilely on the bed and says his memory is fuzzy. He experienced the murder as if in a dream. When Yi-hyun asks how he killed the man, the culprit oddly says he was thirsty. Yi-hyun sees his bloody teeth and pries open the culprit's mouth. "Did you bite him?" he asks. Elsewhere, Se-bom and Sung-young eat at the cafeteria. She sees a notice about a new apartment complex where 3 units are being awarded to lucky police officers of merit. While Se-bom tries to think of a way she could score one of the units, she gets a call from Yi-hyun. He gives her a heads up that the culprit in his case mentioned getting drugs from one of the SOU's new recruits named Jong-tae. It's the kid who botched the training earlier. Se-bom has apartments on the brain and sees this as an opportunity to prove her merit and put herself in the running. Se-bom takes off to find Jong-tae and stops outside of a door. Through the window, she sees what looks like 2 men having sexy times on the floor. Sung-young comes up behind her, and they bust into the room to break it up. Jong-tae doesn't respond to their commands, and it becomes clear there's something amiss when he bites a chunk out of the neck of the other man. Se-bom whips out her gun at the sight of the bloody-mouthed, growling Jong-tae and shoots him in the knee. Nothing seems to impede Jong-tae, so all they can do is go on the defensive. Se-bom yells at Sung-young to take the wounded man to safety while she holds off Jong-tae. She keeps him at bay and even shoots him again. He just keeps coming at her. Se-bom manages to lock Jong-tae in the room and joins Sung-young in the hall. Jong-tae bangs his head against the door window until he literally knocks himself down. Suddenly, Jong-tae sounds human again and calls out for help. Se-bom cautiously opens the door, gun raised. Jong-tae is back to his senses and finally feels the pain from his wounds. While she washes the blood off her hands, Se-bom calls Yi-hyun to yell at him for failing to warn her. She asks how he managed to subdue the culprit without a gun, to which Yi-hyun replies in confusion that he just reasoned with him. Yi-hyun begins to understand and asks if Jong-tae tried to bite her. Se-bom says he did and then notices what looks like a bite mark on her hand. She thinks back to the struggle and recalls Jong-tae's nails scratching her. Lieutenant Colonel Hn Taisuk, a stiff military officer, approaches Se-bom in the woman's bathroom, flanked by mask-wearing soldiers. He informs Se-bom that Jong-tae is believed to have an infectious disease. Taisuk takes her phone and tells Yi-hyun that Se-bom will have to call him back. After Se-bom hands over her gun to Taisuk, the soldiers lead her to a military vehicle. Taisuk informs Sung-young that the incident is officially an accident and must be kept confidential. Taisuk picks up when Yi-hyun calls Se-bom again. He almost hangs up until Yi-hyun introduces himself as a police officer. Taisuk tells him about Se-bom being taken for testing and is surprised when Yi-hyun asks if this is about Jong-tae. Yi-hyun explains about his current case, and Taisuk immediately heads over to the precinct. He tells Yi-hyun that only those who were bitten or scratched need to be quarantined. While Sae-bom is taken to the quarantine site, Taisuk shares what they know about the virus with Yi-hyun and Jungkook. They suspect it affects the brain. Those bitten are either infected or die of blood loss. Yi-hyun tells Taisuk that the culprit took some pill and wonders if the symptoms could be hallucinogenic side effects. Taisuk dismisses that idea but still wants to know if they find anything more about the drug. While Jungkook checks up on the toxicology report, Yi-hyun scours the motel room for the drugs. He finds a pill, but it might not matter. The toxicology report came back clean, indicating Jongtae really was infected with something. That night, Yi-hyun stops by the baseball training academy and asks his friend for his expertise. Since he got kicked out for drugs, he thought he might know what the mystery pill is. His friend reluctantly takes a look and immediately notices a serial number on the pill. No illicit drug would have that. Yi-hyun lies down for a nap and tells his friend to let him know when he locates the pill in the pharmaceutical database. At the quarantine center, Sae-bom is thoroughly examined and tested. Taisuk comes in but doesn't give her many answers. She wonders if she'll become like Jongtae and terrifies Lee Jasoo, the military medic examining her, by pretending to go all zombie on her. Ever stoic and professional, Taisuk ignores her antics and tells her to relay the details of the incident. Sae-bom describes Jongtae's appearance and asks if this infection is akin to rabies. Taisuk says it's similar. He denies the theory that it's related to drugs, saying the police always prefer that easy answer. Sae-bom explains she's not a cop per se, her unit is counter-terrorism. When she asks about Jongtae's condition, Taisuk says is recovering remarkably well. Sae-bom still doesn't have her phone and uses a landline to call Yi-hyun that night and blame him for her current predicament. They're close enough friends that he's already called her mother and given an excuse for why Sae-bom is unreachable. Yi-hyun shares that Jongtae's drug results came back negative, but he still thinks there's something to the drug angle. Yi-hyun promises to solve the case and encourages her to rest. Sae-bom is locked into her room for the night and finds a barely concealed blood spot on the wall. She hears screeching and banging coming from nearby rooms. We pan out and see every room of the building occupied with infected people, all zombieing out except for Sae-bom. Taisuk goes over Sae-bom's unusual test results, finding that she's uninfected. She might be the first case of antibodies to the virus. The next morning, Yi-hyun learns that the pill he found is a discontinued pneumonia medication that was developed due to COVID. It was pulled off the market because of mood and hallucinogenic side effects. Yi-hyun's friend doesn't see how this drug could be responsible for the rabies-like symptoms. After getting Jungkook to trace the number Sae-bom called from, Yi-hyun heads over to the university being used as a quarantine site. Meanwhile, Jisoo retrieves Sae-bom for more testing. Sae-bom spots Jongtae in a room and pushes past Jisoo to run inside. Sae-bom barricades the door shut and promises she just needs a minute. They've Hannibal Lecter at Jongtae, strapping a muzzle-like shield over his face. She asks if he's okay and then checks how much he remembers from the incident. She isn't convinced this is a case of infection, but he denies any knowledge of the drugs he supposedly sold. Jongtae suddenly asks for water, saying he's thirsty. Jisoo urgently shouts from the crack in the door not to give him any. Jongtae powers down, closing his eyes and going non-responsive. Sae-bom leans in close, which of course is when he goes into full zombie mode and pounces on her. She holds him off until the soldiers break down the door and subdue him with what seems like a dangerous amount of electric current. Sae-bom stares straight into the security camera and asks Taisuk if he's watching. Yi-hyun arrives at the site and is let through when he says he brought the pill for Taisuk. Inside, Sae-bom bursts into Taisuk's little watchtower and accuses him of purposefully leading her to Jongtae. Taisuk explains that infected people turn rabid after experiencing insatiable thirst, and is trying to discover precipitating conditions. The slow heart rate, fast healing, and inability to feel pain could be useful if controlled. Since the public is already on edge regarding viruses, they're doing this terrifying military experiment research secretly. He encourages Sae-bom to take some time off. They'll set her up wherever she wants and say she was hurt in the line of duty. She just needs to undergo blood tests every couple of weeks. Sae-bom agrees on the condition that he gives her the highest evaluation possible so she can get one of those apartments. He agrees, noting her record is strong. Sae-bom casually says she was born to fight terrorism. When he asks if she has a boyfriend, she says their age gap is a bit much. He clarifies that she'll need more than a good evaluation to get that unit. Does she have plans to get married soon? Sae-bom says she can start planning now. Taisuk is surprised by how unfazed she is over all this, but Sae-bom doesn't see the point in worrying about possible implications. In the corridor, Yi-hyun comes running up to see if she's okay. When Sae-bom pretends to bite him, Jisoo whips out her baton and takes a fighting stance. Sae-bom suddenly thinks to question how Yi-hyun got in and panics. He chuckles that he's here to save her. Yi-hyun says he'll be right back and goes in to hand over the pills to Taisuk. Yi-hyun assumes there's no way the pills were the cause, but Taisuk observes that just because something used to be harmless doesn't mean it always will be. When Yi-hyun strides down the hallway, Saebom gets this look. She mumbles that he's been right there this whole time. Saebom asks if he's dating, or grinds his teeth. It's a no on all fronts, so she asks, should we get married? Yi-hyun flashes back to that day in high school where he asked her to date him. He sighs that he already told her he was kidding back then. I'm not, Saebom says. At a homeless shelter, soldiers carry out dead bodies while Taisuk investigates the scene. Jisoo explains that a homeless man had been taking pneumonia medicine that was later discovered to be recalled. Since the medication was donated, nobody realized there was a problem until it was too late. Back at SOU headquarters, Sungyoung watches reports about the infection spreading worldwide. After spotting Taisuk in footage from the shelter, he becomes convinced the situation is about to spiral out of control. As usual, Saebom stays calm. She brushes off the growing panic while Sungyoung worries endlessly. Both of them have also been contacted by a reporter asking questions, but Saebom reminds him they signed an NDA and shouldn't talk. Meanwhile, Saebom proudly announces that she's finally moving into her own apartment after earning enough points as a newlywed. Sungyoung immediately realizes she only got married for better housing and asks who the unlucky guy is. She casually replies that it's someone she rejected years ago. In a flashback, we see Saebom proposing the fake marriage to Yi-hyun. He instantly figures out her real motive, but she desperately tries to convince him it's because he's such a great catch. Yi-hyun clearly doesn't believe her excuses, but to her surprise, he agrees anyway. Sungyoung congratulates her, though he still looks completely confused by the whole thing. Saebom notices him rubbing his throat repeatedly and asks if he's okay. He insists he's fine, but she doesn't look convinced. After stepping away to answer Yi-hyun's call about moving day, Saebom returns to find Sungyoung already gone. Outside, he secretly meets the reporter offering money for exclusive information. Flashbacks reveal that Sungyoung was actually scratched during the earlier incident, but he hid it from Saebom. Elsewhere, Jungkook congratulates Yi-hyun for finally ending up with Saebom, even if the marriage is fake. He also shares the background check he ran on Taisuk. Apparently, Taisuk is an infectious disease expert who first worked through the military before joining a pharmaceutical company. Things became suspicious when Taisuk was later charged with assaulting the company's CEO. Even though he was found not guilty, he eventually returned to military service under the Central Disaster Countermeasures headquarters. During the drive home, Saebom keeps thinking about Sungyoung's warning. According to him, nobody except Saebom has ever walked out of the quarantine center alive. At the apartment building, Saebom meets her first neighbor in the elevator. Resident Kim Se-hoon from Unit 1501 immediately judges her for not wearing a mask and hands her one. But the moment he notices her SOU hoodie, he turns into an excited fanboy and begs her to get him an SOU t-shirt someday. Confused but amused, Saebom agrees. When she reaches the apartment, Yi-hyun is already unpacking. She bursts out laughing after seeing the giant framed photo he hung on the wall to make their marriage look believable in case officials stop by. Ironically, it's a picture taken the day Saebom shoved him off a rooftop. The two laugh at how miserable they both looked in the photo while she stood there in handcuffs. As Yi-hyun continues cleaning, Saebom heads out to deliver rice cakes to the neighbors. Her first stop is Unit 502, where a cheerful little girl named Se-hyun answers the door and politely accepts the gift. While exploring the building, Saebom notices the stairway to the upper floors has been blocked off with cinder blocks. Se-hyun explains that the higher floors belong to apartment owners who don't want renters using their space. Without hesitation, Saebom kicks the barricaded door open, sending the blocks flying everywhere. She casually points out that blocking emergency exits violates fire safety laws anyway. Next, she visits Unit 602, home to lawyer Guk Ha-sung. Although he politely accepts the rice cakes, he immediately throws them away once the door closes. His wife thinks he's being paranoid, but he explains that years of dealing with criminals taught him never to trust strangers. Nearby, Saebom hears strange noises from Unit 601 before resident Minute G suddenly appears behind her. Minute G reluctantly accepts the rice cakes and disappears inside. Behind closed doors, her husband Joo-hyung acts overly affectionate while secretly hiding his mistress under their bed. Back downstairs, Saebom becomes emotional while looking around her new home. For the first time in her life, she finally has a place of her own. She excitedly talks about decorating ideas while Yi-hyun quietly agrees with everything she says. When she notices he prepared both beds in the same room, Yi-hyun awkwardly offers to move one elsewhere. Saebom refuses, saying they need to look like a real married couple if anyone checks. That night, Saebom admits her family once lived crammed together in a tiny basement apartment where she constantly listened to her parents fighting. Ever since then, she's dreamed of having her own peaceful space. After finally getting it, she jokingly says the world better not collapse now. Moments later, she falls asleep while Yi-hyun quietly tucks her blanket around her. But peace doesn't last long. Saebom wakes from a nightmare about Jung-tae warning that she'll eventually turn into a monster too. Suddenly, loud banging noises echo from upstairs. Yi-hyun offers to confront the neighbors, but Saebom tells him not to bother. The next morning, Yi-hyun runs into Taisuk in the apartment lobby. Annoyed, he complains about Taisuk constantly dragging SAE bomb into blood tests and investigations. Taisuk smugly reminds him that without him, Yi-hyun never would have gotten the chance to marry SAE bomb at all. Taisuk then reveals that the government plans to announce the connection between the homeless shelter murders and the drug called Next. All products are being recalled, and illegal distributors will face severe punishment. Unfortunately for Yi-hyun, Taisuk also announces they'll be working together on the case. Yi-hyun instantly refuses until his chief calls and orders him to cooperate anyway. Their first mission is simple: pretend to be Jong-tae and track down the dealer supplying Next. Yi-hyun complains about how difficult narcotics investigations are, especially since infiltrating dealers usually requires huge amounts of money. Taisuk immediately shuts him up by dropping a giant duffel bag full of cash onto the table and calmly telling him to save the receipts. Trying to provoke him, Yi-hyun brings up Taisuk's suspicious pharmaceutical past, but Taisuk doesn't flinch. He openly admits he wasn't talented at developing drugs, only stealing them from competitors. Meanwhile, Saebom talks with her mother, who complains about learning about the marriage from Yi-hyun instead of her own daughter. Saebom casually mentions she's still being monitored because of the virus now nicknamed human rabies. Her mother immediately worries about Yi-hyun living with her, but Saebom jokingly insists they're perfectly fine because they're in love. After faking a cough to avoid more questions, she quickly hangs up. Later, the loud banging upstairs starts again. Fed up, Saebom storms out to confront whoever's causing it. Outside, Seo-yoon shyly slips a handwritten thank you note under her door and asks if she's really a police officer. Seo-yoon reveals she wants to grow up to be just like Saebom once she gets healthy again. Saebom comforts her by sharing that she was seriously sick for years too but eventually recovered completely. The two head upstairs together to confront the noisy neighbors in Unit 601. Joo-hyung answers and apologizes, claiming he was simply moving furniture late at night. After he shuts the door, Seo-yoon explains that both Joo-hyung and his wife are doctors, even though he mostly stays home all day. Seo-yoon looks disappointed when Saebom tries leaving alone, so Saebom eventually lets her tag along to the building gym. Unfortunately, the staff awkwardly informs Saebom that the gym is only for apartment owners, not renters. Even Seo-yoon already knew about the unfair rule but hoped Saebom might somehow break it. Instead, Saebom simply takes her outside to use the public exercise equipment. Elsewhere, Sung-young's condition worsens rapidly. In a disturbing moment, he even considers harming himself before stopping midway. Eventually, he calls Saebom and finally admits he was scratched during the attack. Saebom immediately drives him to the quarantine center, reassuring him that he'll probably survive just like she did. Inside, Jisoo examines his wound and immediately notices something suspicious. The injury doesn't look like a scratch at all. Because it isn't. Sung-young secretly hid the real infected wound and intentionally injured himself instead, hoping to sell information to the reporter for money. While Saebom leaves briefly for another blood test, Sung-young convinces himself he can still escape safely. Removing the restraining muzzle from his face, he sneaks deeper into the facility and follows soldiers transporting critical patients. He eventually slips into one of the refrigerated containers being used to store infected victims. Inside, he freezes in horror after discovering dozens of bodies surrounding him. Outside, a soldier notices the container door slightly open and unknowingly locks Sung-young inside. At that exact moment, the reporter messages him, promising 100 million won in exchange for video evidence. Sung-young nervously begins recording, but suddenly the infected bodies around him begin waking up. Meanwhile, Yi-hyun and Taisuk arrive at a warehouse while investigating the Next distribution network. Taisuk admits he originally stole the drug from overseas while working for the pharmaceutical company. Suddenly, headlights blind them from across the warehouse. A man demands to know where Jong-tae is. Yi-hyun immediately starts fighting, easily overpowering the men who step out of the vehicle. When Yi-hyun asks where the drugs are hidden, the terrified dealer points toward the trunk. The moment Yi-hyun opens it, a chained infected man lunges straight at him. Barely holding the creature back, Yi-hyun watches Taisuk raise his gun. But for a brief second, Taisuk freezes after remembering a woman chained to a hospital bed in the same condition. Then he pulls the trigger. Yi-hyun is horrified as Taisuk continues firing multiple shots into the trunk. Furious, Yi-hyun points his own gun at him and demands an explanation. Coldly, Taisuk asks, "Does that still look human to you?" Jungkook arrives after hearing the gunshots and discovers the dealers had been using the infected man as a guard dog after he murdered his entire family. Before they can process everything, Taisuk receives an emergency call from the quarantine center. He and Yi-hyun rush there immediately. At the facility, Saebom receives one final call from Sung-young. "They are not human," he whispers before the line suddenly cuts off. When soldiers attempt to open the container, Saebom urgently screams for them to stop. The doors open only slightly before the infected violently slam themselves forward. Just before the soldiers force the doors shut again, Saebom catches sight of Sung-young inside. His eyes have already turned white. he throws himself against the container door. Yi-hyun, Taisuk, and Jungkook make their way to the quarantine site. Jungkook stays outside while Taisuk and Yi-hyun rush in with guns blazing. Out back, Sae-bom watches the soldiers struggle to close the container doors. She suddenly rushes forward. Sae-bom pushes past the soldiers and Jisoo to open the doors. She forces the zombies back with a metal bar like a badass and somehow manages to grab Sung-young in the chaos. But the zombies have a hold on them both, and she can't break free. Right as the soldiers close the doors of the container with Sae-bom inside, Yi-hyun appears. Yi-hyun grabs Sae-bom, pulling her back while she pulls Sung-young. Once they're out, Yi-hyun throws a flash grenade he got from a soldier into the container. The zombies fall back, letting the soldiers shut the doors. Later, Sae-bom checks on Sung-young who's seemingly okay. He apologizes for his recklessness and worries about his family if he turns like the others. In the hall, Sae-bom tells Jisoo she's disappointed in her, for letting them close the doors with Sung-young inside. Yi-hyun is also angry at the disregard of humanity and confronts Taisuk about keeping the zombies locked away waiting to die. Taisuk argues they're doing their best to help those with mild symptoms and isolate those with severe symptoms. That's not enough for Yi-hyun, who wonders if Taisuk could be so cruel were the patient's his own family. Taisuk is focused on the bigger picture and believes group survival is more important than an individual life. Sae-bom joins them and demands Taisuk disclose everything to the public and focus on developing treatment. If he doesn't, she'll expose this operation herself. Yi-hyun tells Taisuk he hopes they won't cross paths again. He slaps the truck and says the patients are trying to survive, too. In the car, Sae-bom is quiet and seems to feel survivor's guilt for being immune. Yi-hyun says it's a relief she's uninfected and assures her they're sure to find a treatment soon for the others. At the elevator, they run into Sehun, who asks about his t-shirt. Sehun is already in the elevator with her mom Kang Eun-jae and excitedly greets Sae-bom. Eun-ji thanks Sae-bom for looking out for her daughter. Joo-hyung then enters with the woman he stashed under the bed. As Sehun whispers to Sae-bom that her husband is handsome, Yi-hyun notices blood on Joo-hyung's sleeve. At home, Yi-hyun and Sae-bom have a video call with his mom who lives in Boston. Sae-bom was worried she wouldn't buy their relationship, but Yi-hyun was confident no one would ever guess they got married for an apartment. Sure enough, his mom immediately says she always knew they'd end up together. She asks for a private word with Sae-bom. Yi-hyun hesitates to leave, but then the banging noises start up again from number 601, so he heads upstairs. Ha-sung is already there, asking Joo-hyung if everything is alright. Joo-hyung shiftily says the noises are from his sick wife Minute-ji throwing things. He introduces the other woman as the manager of Minute-ji's clinic and says she stopped by to help. The manager looks suspiciously nervous and doesn't say a word. Yi-hyun asks if Minute-ji is scratching or biting, but Joo-hyung claims she's not. Yi-hyun again clocks the blood on Joo-hyung's sleeve but only asks for the name of Minute-ji's clinic. That night, Sae-bom and Yi-hyun talk about whether they should do the typical wedding and honeymoon thing. When she asks where he'd want to go, he just says wherever she wants to go. While they sleep, Taisuk goes back to the warehouse. On his way to retrieve the duffel bag full of pills in the car trunk, he shoots one of the men who have fully turned. He lets his soldiers handle the rest. The next morning, Sehun watches news coverage of the virus. Her parents enter the room, fighting about money and her illness. They don't even notice when she says she's going to visit Sae-bom and leaves. At the precinct, Yi-hyun calls Minute-ji's clinic and learns she's off for the week. He also learns that the manager's name is Woo Sang-hee, and she's currently at the clinic. Jungkook informs him that they're off the case with Taisuk. Meanwhile, Sae-bom's mom calls and tells her to turn on the news. They're playing the clip Sung-young filmed from inside the container. A governmental emergency alert is sent to cell phones nationwide. At the station, Yi-hyun helps subdue a man who lies he has the virus and starts biting a cop. Sae-bom gets home from grocery shopping and sees Young-ok putting up a flyer about the stairwell door incident. Sae-bom asserts she's the one who kicked it in and calls the blocked door a fire hazard. Young-ok is the president of the resident association and is the type to smile politely while making not quite rude comments about your station. When Young-ok says a fire marshal approved the door, Na-hyun-kyung from number 401 points out that Marshall works for a company they hired. Sae-bom and Young-ok end up arguing about the noises coming from number 601. Young-ok says she can't be sure it's the doctor couple. Elderly resident Ji Sung-il hands out pamphlets about Jesus' love and encourages them to stop fighting and go to church instead. Elsewhere, Yi-hyun approaches Sang-hee as she loads her car full of Minute-ji's things from the office and flashes his badge. While he asks her what's going on in that apartment, Sae-bom visits number 601 after hearing loud noises again. Joo-hyung opens the door, looking exhausted. Sae-bom sees blood on his sleeve, and pushes inside the apartment. He begs her not to open the bathroom door since Minute-ji is prone to lunging at people. There aren't any zombie sounds from the room, so Sae-bom carefully opens the door. As she tries to talk to Minute-ji, Joo-hyung sneaks up behind Sae-bom. The man actually pushes her inside and locks the door. There are bloody handprints all over the walls, and Minute-ji is looking pretty zombified. Sae Bomb shuts herself inside the glass shower while Minute G calmly stalks toward her. Minute G is eerily silent as she presses her hands against the glass and stares into Sae Bomb's freaking soul. Outside, Sae Bomb can hear Ju-hyun calling the police to explain his wife is exhibiting symptoms of the virus and his neighbor is in danger. Sae Bomb bargains with Minute G, promising to let her out. Minute G doesn't attack her as she reaches out of the shower to fling open the bathroom door. Minute G ignores Sae Bomb and goes straight for Ju-hyun. He runs downstairs to the 5th floor, past Sae-yoon standing in the hallway. Sae-yoon turns and sees zombie Minute G standing there. Luckily, Sae Bomb is hot on their heels. She cleverly grabbed a pillow that she uses to cover Minute G's face as she tackles her. Sae Bomb manages to hold Minute G off long enough for Yi-hyun to arrive. He uses his outer shirt to cover Minute G's face and drag her off Sae Bomb. As he handcuffs Minute G, Sae Bomb runs over to comfort the terrified Sae-yoon. Yi-hyun then walks over to where Jun-hyung is hiding and punches him in the stomach. While the paramedics take Minute G, Yi-hyun examines her apartment. He finds traces of blood throughout the apartment, including on a golf club that he bags for evidence. In the bathroom, he finds next pills. Now that the threat is real for them, the residents descend on the grocery store to begin the pandemic hoarding ritual. A couple opt for online shopping instead, but there are already delays in delivery. Song-shil goes home to find her husband Kim Hae chilling on the couch. Her son Kim Dong-hyun is doing a live stream and brushes her off when she tries to tell him what's going on. Elsewhere, Taisuk gives a televised press briefing about the virus and its symptoms. He encourages anyone feeling symptoms or noticing them in others to call the CDCH. Sae Bomb and Yi-hyun watch at home and discuss what happened with Minute G and Ju-hyun. They head out for a walk and run into Young Ok, who asks them to keep today's events quiet. Only the residents witnessed what happened, so they can keep it from leaking. Bad rumors don't help the price of our apartment. Outside, Sae Bomb admits she understands where Young Ok is coming from. She'd want to keep this expensive place peaceful too. That night, Yi-hyun lies awake and ends up going out. He's surprised to see Ju-hyun in the parking garage. Apparently, his test results were clean, so they sent him home. When Yi-hyun threatens to put Ju-hyun in prison soon, Ju-hyun starts yelling about his special skill of filing complaints and suing people. Yi-hyun ignores him and drives over to see Taisuk. He shows Taisuk the pills he found at Minute G's and gathers that next is the real cause of illness. Yi-hyun observes that they took care of the dealers from the warehouse, but Taisuk doesn't provide any answers. Taisuk does grant him a visit with Minute G. She's tied to a bed and still hasn't returned to a normal state. Jisoo reveals Minute G was about to die when she got the virus. It's the only thing keeping her alive. When she returns to normal, she'll likely die. Yi-hyun gets on eye level with Minute G and promises to catch whoever did this to her. While Ju-hyun cleans the blood off his bathroom walls, Taisuk goes to meet with the dealer they've stashed in a refrigerated container. He asks if the dealer sold to anyone in the apartment complex, but the dealer doesn't want to talk for nothing. The next day, Hak Jae yells at Sung-shil for having the audacity to not feel up to cooking his food. He says he's going out and gets annoyed when Sung-shil asks for a hamburger. Meanwhile, Jisoo calls Yi-hyun to let him know Minute G passed away. He drags Jungkook with him to Ju-hyun's apartment to break the news to him. He's not exactly crushed. Yi-hyun notices how clean the apartment looks and asks if Ju-hyun cleaned his golf club too after bashing his wife's head in with it. Ju-hyun argues it was self-defense, but Yi-hyun has another theory. Minute G was supposed to die after being struck, but instead, she got the virus and survived. Yi-hyun holds up a forensic report as evidence. He also brings up Ju-hyun's criminal record and revoked medical license. Yi-hyun postulates that after being forced to hand over his clinic to Minute G, Ju-hyun must have wanted to make a comeback. Ju-hyun is confident Yi-hyun can't prove his theory, until Jungkook brings Sang-hee in as a witness. Yi-hyun arrests Ju-hyun on the spot. Elsewhere, Taisuk sits by a woman's bedside, the same zombified woman from the flashback last episode. In another flashback, he walks in and freezes in shock to see a zombie biting her neck. Taisuk leaves her bedside and tells Jisoo to proceed with cordoning off the building. In a fast food restaurant, Hak Jae struggles with the touchscreen ordering system. He tries to get someone to help, but everyone in the line ignores him. On the outside exercise equipment, Sae-yoon tells Sae Bomb that she's decided to get surgery. She's more susceptible to illness, so her mom is worried about the virus spreading at the complex. They'll leave for the hospital after her mom gets back from being tested. When Taisuk shows up, Sae Bomb steps aside to talk to him. He shares that the dealer confessed to selling Next as a diet and concentration aid to gym members at the complex. Many more cases will soon occur, and there's only one safety measure they can take. Sirens sound and soldiers surround the grounds of the complex. They literally wall the residents inside and block every exit. Taisuk claims it's a temporary measure until they have the resources to handle things. Since Sae Bomb is valuable, she's free to leave. Sae Bomb is sorry she didn't make their secret operation public from the start and refuses to leave. Running away isn't her style. Hak Jae returns to see all the soldiers outside. He catches Taisuk on his way out to ask what's going on. Taisuk tells him he can go inside, but if he does, he can't leave again. In the lobby, Sae-bom calls Yi-hyun. She says she's locked in and tells him not to fight his way inside. As she promises to protect the building, Yi-hyun walks out of the elevator with a handcuffed Ju-hyun. Sae-bom runs over and throws her arms around him. "I thought I was alone," she says into his shoulder. She doesn't let go of Yi-hyun even when Ju-hyun takes the opportunity to run out the door. It's not like he'll get far. We return to Yi-hyun's arrest of Ju-hyun. He asks Sang-hee to come to the station and give a statement, but she refuses, saying she's too shaken and only wants to pack her belongings and leave. As soon as Yi-hyun steps out, she rushes into the bedroom as if searching for something. Unaware of the quarantine, Yi-hyun is confused when Sae-bom calls saying she's trapped inside the building. The moment he exits the elevator, Sae-bom hugs him, relieved she isn't alone. Meanwhile, Ju-hyun tries to run despite being handcuffed. Elsewhere, Jungkook delivers rice cakes to Seo-yoon. She notices his holster and realizes he's a police officer. When she asks to see his gun, Jungkook refuses, admitting he's never even used it. Hak Jae returns home with a sandwich for Sungshil, insisting it's basically a hamburger because both use bread. He notices the bandage on her wrist but dismisses her injury as an exaggeration. Hurt by his indifference, she asks if he isn't even curious about what happened. Before she can explain, their son Dong-hyun storms out, blaming her for letting him oversleep before heading to the garage where residents are already trying to leave. In apartment 202, cleaning business owners Go Sek-kyu and Ji Moon-hee continue working with their employee Andrew, unaware they've chosen the worst possible day for the job. Meanwhile, Ha-sung and So-yoon wonder why sirens are blaring outside. Their conversation is interrupted when Ju-hyun calls Ha-sung for legal help, claiming he was arrested illegally. When Ha-sung asks what the charges are, Yi-hyun grabs the phone and bluntly replies, "Murder," before hanging up. Ju-hyun then tries appealing to Sae-bom, even threatening to report them for human rights violations. She jokingly tells Yi-hyun to hit him without making him bleed. As Yi-hyun escorts him back inside, Sae-bom checks the newly established quarantine perimeter. Elsewhere, Seminik complains when his sister Hyun-kyung refuses to lend him money or let his family move into her luxury apartment. Their argument is interrupted by an announcement from Young-ok calling all residents to an evening meeting regarding the quarantine. Watching the news, Hyun-kyung sees the military blockade outside and asks Seminik if it looked like that when he arrived. He casually admits it did, but assumed it was construction work. Sae-bom stays with Seo-yoon, who is waiting anxiously for her mother. Unable to enter the complex, her mother calls and explains that Seo-yoon has a heart condition and must avoid excessive physical activity or injuries. After comforting Seo-yoon, Sae-bom receives a worried call from her own mother, who urges her to stay indoors and wait out the quarantine. Sae-bom replies that not everyone has that luxury. While Sae-bom arranges a meeting with Taisuk, Yi-hyun returns Ju-hyun to his apartment and gives him back his phone. Sang-hee begs for help leaving the complex, but Yi-hyun explains his trap there as well. Concerned about leaving her alone with Ju-hyun, he handcuffs the suspect to a bedside table before heading to the residents' meeting. On the way, he encounters So-yoon, who asks about Ju-hyun. Yi-hyun assures her that he's restrained and warns her law firm against taking his case. Back upstairs, Ju-hyun attempts to bribe Sang-hee into freeing him. Initially cold toward him, she suddenly becomes interested when he asks how much money it would take. Before the meeting begins, Jungkook tells Yi-hyun that none of the residents seem connected to the suspicious drugs they are investigating. A live broadcast from the disease control authorities then announces a one-week quarantine. Residents are promised compensation, food, and basic necessities, though the officials leave before answering questions. Young-ok quickly takes charge of the room, calming the crowd. She reminds everyone that the virus isn't airborne and insists it's unlikely there are many infected people among such respectable residents. Besides, they already have police officers in the building. Jungkook volunteers Yi-hyun to explain the situation. Yi-hyun outlines the major symptoms, including extreme thirst and white eyes, and advises residents to stay in groups and keep their doors open whenever possible. At the same time, Sae-bom meets Taisuk in the garage and asks him to help Seo-yoon leave the complex. Taisuk reveals that both of Seo-yoon's parents are likely infected, making it safer for her to remain under someone else's care. Back at the meeting, Yi-hyun talks Seminik out of attempting to climb over the wall. Young-ok explains that neighboring buildings want nothing to do with them because the first infected case originated in their complex. When residents ask whether any staff members are currently inside the building, Young-ok confidently says no, despite a cleaning lady visibly standing in the doorway. Sae-bom immediately points out the contradiction, but Young-ok ignores it and smoothly shifts the conversation toward promoting herself as the community's leader. Sae-bom looks ready to challenge her, but Yi-hyun and Jungkook stop her. Young-ok then introduces her pastor husband, Woo-chang, who begins preaching to an audience that clearly isn't interested. After the meeting, Young-ok confronts Sae-bom, criticizing her for undermining order despite being a police officer. Sae-bom replies that maintaining order isn't her specialty, she deals with terrorists. The pair then question the gym trainer, who is drinking an alarming amount of water. He insists he knows nothing about the drug and never took it, but his nervous behavior only makes them more suspicious. Meanwhile, the cleaning couple worries about where they'll stay since they don't live in the complex. Sae-bom promises to find out if they can remain in the apartment they are cleaning. Moon-hee also explains that their employee Andrew suffered a childhood head injury, prefers hiding his face, and only recently started working after masks became common. While collecting residence IDs, Yi-hyun discovers Andrew's real name is on Gukjin and notices he scratched his face out of his identification card. Still suspicious of the trainer, Sae-bom and Yi-hyun order him to stay in the gym office overnight. Sae-bom removes the water supply and places a warning sign on the door, labeling him a possible infection risk. As Yi-hyun compiles a list of potential infected residents, Sae-bom gathers supplies for the building. Later, Yi-hyun checks on Ju-hyung, who is researching inheritance laws. He removes the handcuffs, reminding Ju-hyung that he's living directly below him. Sang-hee shocks him by withdrawing her witness statement, claiming she only accused Ju-hyung because she was angry. With no evidence left, Yi-hyun has no choice but to leave. Soon after, Taisuk informs Yi-hyun that Dong-hyun has been live streaming from inside the quarantine building. If it continues, authorities may cut off television and internet access. Elsewhere, Hak-jae removes Sung-shil's bandage after learning she encountered the infected Minute-ji. Seeing only a sprain, he once again dismisses her concerns. Sae-bom and Yi-hyun track down Dong-hyun, who is filming outside Ju-hyung's apartment. Their interruption only attracts more viewers, but Yi-hyun ultimately shuts the stream down. That night, Yi-hyun complains about their unexpected house guests. While Seo-yoon and Sae-bom sleep in the bedroom, he and Jungkook spend the night in the living room. Before bed, Sae-bom receives a heartfelt text from her mother wishing her happiness. Meanwhile, Yi-hyun researches Taisuk's past assault case and asks Jungkook about Chairman Choi. The story then shifts to an underground facility where Taisuk and Jisoo visit Chairman Choi. Choi criticizes Taisuk for allowing the outbreak to become public, while Taisuk accuses him of releasing Next in order to accelerate treatment development and save his own life. Choi coldly reminds him that Taisuk's pregnant wife also depends on that treatment. Their conversation ends violently when Choi suddenly attacks a guard and tears into his neck. Despite Jisoo drawing her weapon, Taisuk remains calm as Choi struggles against his restraints. Afterward, Taisuk orders Jisoo to trace everyone connected to Choi and shut down the distribution network. Although Jisoo argues Choi should be quarantined, Taisuk insists finding a treatment is the priority. The following morning, news reports reveal that quarantine zones have expanded to 8 locations and several countries have begun closing their borders. Excited by the promise of free meals, Sae-bom heads downstairs with the others only to discover the neighboring buildings have locked them inside to avoid contact with the infected complex. Refusing to tolerate it, she borrows Jungkook's gun and forces them to unlock the doors. Jisoo arrives with food supplies and asks if anyone needs anything else. Sae-bom nearly requests a Special Forces t-shirt for Sehun but quickly realizes the answer would be no. While Yi-hyun speaks with supermarket employee Bo-ram, who remains unusually calm because she's earning triple pay, Sae-bom distributes lunches and surprises Sehun with an army shirt she obtained from Jisoo. Delighted, he recommends visiting the rooftop. The group spends a peaceful afternoon on the roof, briefly forgetting the quarantine. Then Sae-bom suddenly remembers the gym trainer. When she and Yi-hyun return to check on him, he's gone. Unable to use the building's announcement system, they begin searching for him themselves. Their search leads them to blood near the basement elevator. Strange growls echo from inside, forcing them to retreat before the doors open. As they run, they spot the trainer hiding in his car and tell him to follow. The three rush back toward their building, helped inside by the cleaning lady. Moments later, a blood-covered man pounds on the glass begging for help. Before anyone can react, an infected attacker tackles him and drags him away. Watching in horror, Sae-bom and Yi-hyun realize the outbreak has fully erupted. From above, Andrew witnesses infected residents attacking people throughout the complex. At the same time, Sung-shil discovers a wound on her back, suggesting she may have been scratched after all. Seo-yoon receives a final text from her mother that feels like a goodbye, while television and communication systems begin failing. Realizing the danger, Yi-hyun and Sae-bom barricade the lobby and seal the entrances before more infected can enter. Monitoring the situation through security cameras, Taisuk calls Sae-bom to make sure she's safe. As an infected security guard presses against the glass, Taisuk grimly concludes that the other buildings are already lost. Sae-bom rushes back to her apartment, checks on Seo-yoon, and grabs a bat just in case. Phone and TV services are down, with only a message telling everyone to stay inside and wait for rescue. In the lobby, Sungbin blocks the doors, while Yi-hyun and Jungkook stand guard. Young-ok arrives and is shocked by the situation. Upstairs, Sung-shil worries that her racing heart and itchy wound mean she is infected, but Dong-hyun dismisses it as old age and leaves. He meets siblings Hyun-kyung and Seminit. When Hyun-kyung says infections have spread to other buildings, he gets excited to hear that. Everyone gathers in the basement, where Yi-hyun and the cleaning kdrama show bloodstains on a door, as proof a zombie was there. Dong-hyun immediately starts filming. Young-ok privately asks Yi-hyun if he is trying to take her position as residence representative. He assures her he has no interest in it. He then tries to stop people from opening the door, but they want to see for themselves. Saebom arrives, throws the door open, and says anyone who wants to leave can go. Suddenly, nobody wants to go outside. Yi-hyun reminds Young-ok they must personally inform every resident about the danger. In apartment 601, Ha-sung discusses the arrest with Joo-hyung. He keeps staring at Sang-hee. He drops a pen to look at her legs under the table. She notices and teasingly runs her foot along his leg, while his wife sits beside him. Andrew arrives and tells them about a meeting in the gym. Meanwhile, Yi-hyun and Saebom head to the basement, to check that all parking entrances are locked. Yi-hyun swaps his gun for Saebom's bat, because he is more skilled with it. They find no zombies, and Saebom says the infected may have regained their senses, gone home, and are now trying to hide what they did. Sure enough, the infected security guard is shown trembling while cleaning blood off himself. Elsewhere, Taisuk soldiers take over a nightclub connected to Next. The dealers had already locked themselves in the basement, after learning about the raid. Taisuk cuts the power, hears zombie-like sounds from behind the door, and orders the building evacuated and sealed. Back in 601, Joo-hyung is pleased. He believes the outbreak means he will not be sent to jail anytime soon, and thinks he can avoid punishment if he convinces Yi-hyun and Saebom. At the same time, Sung-shil becomes frightened seeing bloodstains on the wall. During the meeting, residents question whether infected people really exist. Ha-sung, his wife, and Joo-hyung arrive. Ha-sung asks whether anyone from the upper floors personally saw the infected. Hyun-kyung accuses him of looking down on lower-floor residents, and an argument starts until Young-ok steps in. Although she never saw the zombies herself, she chooses to trust those who did. Joo-hyung then offers money to anyone willing to go outside and investigate. The lower-floor residents are offended because the offer is clearly aimed at them. Tempted by the cash, cleaners Sekyu, Moon-hee, and Andrew volunteer, while Dong-hyun films everything. Young-ok later meets Yi-hyun and Saebom in the hallway. She is relieved they found no zombies inside the building. Yi-hyun approves restarting the elevators, though Saebom warns there would be no escape if someone got trapped inside with a zombie. When Yi-hyun spots Joo-hyung, he loudly reminds everyone that Joo-hyung is a murderer. Joo-hyung tries to defend himself, but people begin treating him suspiciously. Before he leaves, Saebom quietly warns that she will kill him if he touches Sang-hee. Back in the gym, Woo-chang leads a prayer with the nervous Sung-shil. Jungkook tells Yi-hyun and Saebom about Joo-hyung paying people to go outside. He convinced them to wait until morning, but could do no more. He also reports that Hyun-kyung and So-yoon volunteered to provide food for stranded residents from other buildings. Later, Joo-hyung asks Ha-sung why he refused the offer to go outside. Ha-sung says he does not need the money, so Joo-hyung offers even more. Ha-sung gets angry, so So-yoon pulls Ha-sung inside. Once alone, Ha-sung complains that she stopped him from beating up Joo-hyung. She wants to drop Joo-hyung as a client, but Ha-sung decides to continue, clearly because of his interest in Sang-hee. In apartment 401, Seminit is surprised his sister defended him during the meeting. Hyun-kyung says only she is allowed to criticize her brother, but she still refuses to give him any money. In the gym office, Yi-hyun and Saebom continue questioning Sung-beam, who insists he never took Next. Security footage shows him drinking directly from a keg dispenser. But he still refuses to confess, so they lock him in the gym overnight. While the cleaners cook ramen provided by Hyun-kyung, Jungkook brings the cleaning kdrama to stay with them, because she is afraid to sleep alone in the basement. Elsewhere, Yi-hyun wonders whether they should stop people from going outside the next day, but Saebom points out that it is impossible. Before entering their apartment, she asks him not to tell Se-yoon anything. The moment they walk in, Se-yoon asks if infected people are really outside. Saebom glares at Jungkook for telling her, but calms Se-yoon by assuring her the building is safe and her parents are okay. Elsewhere, Jisoo explains the litter virus. It attacks the nervous system like rabies, with symptoms appearing once it reaches the brain. Next is believed to be its source, and infection can also spread through bites or scratches. The biggest challenge is getting treatment past the blood-brain barrier. Taisuk says researchers are studying an antibody that can directly affect the brain, but they need at least a month. To prevent litter from spreading nationwide, quarantines must remain in place. After the briefing, Jisoo confronts Taisuk, knowing the treatment results are poor. Taisuk argues that if there were truly no hope, all infected people would already be killed. Jisoo is surprised he cares, but Taisuk believes anyone who harms others should face responsibility. For now, they will keep buying time while hoping Saebom's blood provides a solution. The next morning, Saebom finds Yi-hyun wearing protective gear. She reminds him he is not on duty and is also under quarantine. But Yi-hyun refuses to abandon the uninfected people trapped outside. When he asks Jungkook to join him, Jungkook honestly says he avoids dangerous situations. SAE bomb blocks the door and tries to stop Yi-hyun from leaving. Downstairs, Joo-hyung hands money to the cleaning crew preparing to go outside. Yi-hyun arrives with an annoyed SAE bomb. She jokingly asks for a share of the money, but Yi-hyun refuses because the payment is illegal. As Yi-hyun leads the group outside, Sung-shul prays upstairs. When Hak Jae touches her arm, she sharply tells him not to touch her, and suddenly runs out. He fails to notice the bloody bandages she left in the trash. Outside, Dong-hyun asks to join the group. After promising not to post any footage without permission, he is allowed to come along while Joo-hyung watches safely from indoors. The group reaches the perimeter, and finds 4 residents from other buildings waiting there. One of them is the infected security guard. He does not seem to recognize Yi-hyun or SAE bomb from before, and Yi-hyun stops SAE bomb from saying anything. The guard claims the infected have been locked inside the library and that everything is now under control. They say they are waiting for lunchboxes, but Yi-hyun tells SAE bomb they are probably trying to escape before they turn into zombies again. Back in the gym, Young Ok questions Sung-beam about taking next, but he denies it. As she angrily accuses him of getting high when she placed him there to build connections with residents. When he calls her Nuna, she tells him to stop acting like they know each other. Before leaving, Young Ok asks if it is really dangerous outside. Sung-beam says he would never go out there. Soon after, Young Ok hears a loud bang. A man outside the garage door begs her to let him in, claiming he is escaping infected people and has important information. She starts unlocking the door, but notices a bandage on his neck and blood under his fingernails. When she accidentally spills water, the man becomes fixated on it. She pours more water to test him, and he immediately shows signs of infection. Meanwhile, Yi-hyun's group enters a supermarket to gather supplies. SAE bomb laughs at how honest Yi-hyun is when he wonders how they should pay for the items. He argues that people need to follow rules or everything will fall into chaos. They find Boram hiding behind the register. She is terrified, and screams when Yi-hyun touches her shoulder. While the others collect supplies, Sekyu and Moon-hee discover a trail of blood and run back in panic. Dong-hyun starts filming and follows the trail, only to come face to face with 2 zombies. Frozen with fear, he is saved when Andrew calmly pulls him behind some boxes. Boram explains that several infected people rushed into the store earlier, forcing her to hide. She does not know whether they ever left. When Moon-hee and Sekyu report the blood trail, Yi-hyun orders everyone to leave. However, Sekyu accidentally triggers the alarm because of alcohol in his cart. The loud noise sends the zombies into a frenzy. Andrew and Dong-hyun sprint for safety, and barely make it outside. Just as Yi-hyun prepares to go back for them, he and SAE bomb pull down the metal gate and trap the zombies inside. Back at the apartment, Seo-yoon checks the time and wakes Jungkook. SAE bomb had told her to go downstairs if they were not back by 10 o'clock. In the lobby, Young Ok nervously watches outside, as the group returns. However, she refuses to open the door, because they might be infected. Nearby, Joo-hyung watches with interest, and secretly plays an audio recording of Minute Ji's zombie screams. He tells Sang-hee that the police couple cannot send him to prison if they die. Jungkook and Seo-yoon arrive and find the situation chaotic. Spotting Joo-hyung holding the phone, Jungkook chases after him. At the same time, Seo-yoon quietly removes the mop barricading the door and shouts for SAE bomb to hurry inside. The group rushes into the building, creating total chaos. Jungkook struggles to stop the zombie noises playing from the phone, so Yi-hyun smashes it on the ground. The noise stops, and everyone freezes. Furious, Yi-hyun grabs a blood-covered apron, and storms upstairs looking for Joo-hyung. He corners him against a wall and smears the blood across his face. When Yi-hyun says it came from outside, Joo-hyung panics and starts screaming. SAE bomb quickly arrives and pulls the enraged Yi-hyun away, before things get worse. Elsewhere, Dong-hyun breaks down after realizing he lost his phone during the chaos. Later, SAE bomb quietly watches Yi-hyun wash the blood from his hands. He apologizes for losing control. SAE bomb points out that everyone would have been infected, if not for him. She hugs him while he stands there, unsure how to respond. Elsewhere, Taisuk watches a large protest outside the apartment complex. When Jisoo informs him that an escaped infected man has been captured, he shocks her by ordering his release. Taisuk tells her to pretend he escaped, so the protesters can see him. He stresses that nobody should be harmed, but the public must fear the infected, rather than sympathize with them. Only then will they have enough time to continue working on a treatment. The story flashes back 6 months earlier when Taisuk attends a dinner celebrating government approval of Next as an ADHD medication. Chairman Choi and several associates are already using the drug to improve concentration, while Taisuk remains cautious. During the gathering, Taisuk receives a call about a patient who developed violent biting behavior after taking Next. Rather than focusing on the victim, he immediately orders compensation and instructs his team to keep the incident quiet. Moments later, a loud crash comes from inside the restaurant. Taisuk rushes back and is horrified to find his wife lying on the floor covered in blood while Chairman Choi bites into her neck. Back in the present, Jisoo informs Taisuk that the Prime Minister wants a meeting. While discussing logistics, Taisuk reveals that refrigerator trucks are being sent to a landfill because the storage space is needed elsewhere. He warns Jisoo that she may eventually face the same difficult choices. Jisoo also reports that every patient given the experimental treatment has died. Taisuk orders the trials to continue while he buys more time. Meanwhile, another emergency meeting is held at the apartment complex, though attendance is low. Hakjae argues they should escape before help stops coming, but Yi-hyun insists leaving is far too dangerous. As usual, Haesung questions whether residents are exaggerating the threat. Saebom sarcastically suggests he go outside and verify it himself. After the meeting, Saebom suddenly realizes nobody has checked the rooftop. She and Yi-hyun rush upstairs. They discover Andrew quietly enjoying the view. Yi-hyun comments on how calm he always seems, and Andrew admits he's simply grateful that people no longer treat him like an outsider. After Andrew leaves, Saebom reflects on her regrets. She wishes she'd spent more time with her mother instead of avoiding difficult situations. When she worries about the future and whether everyone will survive, Yi-hyun reminds her that they can only focus on getting through one day at a time. She then scolds him for smearing infected blood on Joo-hyung earlier. Yi-hyun jokes that he never actually forced Joo-hyung to touch it. Elsewhere, Young Ok struggles with the growing crisis. When Woo Chang suggests abandoning the apartment complex, she panics over the financial losses it would cause. However, she quickly changes her mood after realizing the post-lockdown repairs and contracts could be highly profitable. Determined to protect her position, she decides to strengthen relationships with influential residents. Young Ok later visits Yi-hyun and Saebom to apologize for locking them outside. Nevertheless, Saebom allows her inside. While chatting, Young Ok notices an old photo showing a teenage Saebom in handcuffs and is shocked. Meanwhile, Seyun quietly tells Saebom that she doesn't trust Young Ok. Saebom advises her to keep her enemies close. Down in the gym, Yi-hyun and Jungkook discuss Young Ok's obsession with being the building representative. Jungkook explains that the position controls approval of apartment contracts, making it extremely profitable. Yi-hyun finally understands that the issue is really about money. Later, Yi-hyun checks on Sungbim, who is frustrated about being confined to the gym office. Yi-hyun promises to loosen restrictions if he continues showing no symptoms. At the same time, Joo-hyung obsessively scrubs his face while checking for signs of infection and plotting revenge against Yi-hyun. Sang-hee remains in the apartment and continues secretly searching through Joo-hyung's belongings whenever he's gone. Eventually, Joo-hyung visits Sungbim and sarcastically thanks him for supplying drugs to Minute-ji before demanding some for himself. When Sungbim denies everything, Joo-hyung loses his temper and begins throwing objects at him while Yi-hyun observes from outside. Meanwhile, the infected resident from the neighboring building contacts Haesung after seeing his legal advertisement. He repeats the lie that only a few infected people remain trapped elsewhere and convinces Haesung to meet him in the basement garage. Fortunately, Soyoon discovers the plan by checking the intercom records. Realizing the danger, she immediately warns Yi-hyun and Saebom, who rush downstairs. Back in the gym, the situation suddenly turns deadly. Yi-hyun walks in to find Sungbim fully transformed while Joo-hyung desperately struggles to escape. Terrified, Joo-hyung begs Yi-hyun to save him. Yi-hyun coldly replies that the world might be better off without him. At the same time, Haesung nearly follows the infected resident outside after being tempted with promises of internet access. Saebom arrives just in time and slams the door shut before he can leave. Even after nearly getting himself killed, Haesung complains more about losing a client than the danger he was in. Back upstairs, Yi-hyun eventually rescues Joo-hyung and warns him not to reveal Sungbim's condition. If he does, Yi-hyun will release footage showing Joo-hyung being attacked. Confused, Joo-hyung asks why Yi-hyun continues protecting Sungbim. Yi-hyun answers simply that Sungbim is still a person. The moment Yi-hyun turns away, Joo-hyung grabs a weight plate and tries attacking him from behind. Unfortunately for him, Yi-hyun easily knocks him down and briefly considers letting Sungbim finish the job. Footsteps soon approach the gym, giving Joo-hyung a chance to escape. However, he runs straight into Saebom. Moments later, Haesung and Soyoon arrive. Joo-hyung claims Yi-hyun tried to feed him to a monster, but when everyone enters the gym and sees the transformed Sungbim for themselves, Yi-hyun's plan to keep the infection hidden immediately falls apart. When questioned, Young Ok pretends she had no idea Sungbim was being kept there. Later, after returning to normal, Sungbim finally admits that he took Nex twice. Yi-hyun warns him that every transformation makes it harder to regain control. Sungbim also reveals that he already told Joo-hyung about the remaining pills hidden in his car. That night, Saebom informs Yi-hyun that residents will vote the next day on whether Sungbim should be expelled. She also carefully asks whether Joo-hyung was telling the truth about Yi-hyun trying to kill him. Embarrassed, Yi-hyun admits he only scared him a little. The two joke about playing good cop and bad cop, though Saebom insists she's the scarier one. Meanwhile, Haesung launches a campaign to remove Sungbim, using footage of his transformation to frighten residents. When he visits Sang-hee, He even offers her a room in his apartment. She declines but gives him a suspiciously calculated hug before he leaves. Elsewhere, Sungshil continues monitoring herself for symptoms while Saebom tries convincing Sehun to attend the vote and support Sungbim. Sehun refuses, saying he'll remain isolated until the quarantine ends. Later that evening, Saebom shares drinks with Yi-hyun and admits she doesn't want to live with regrets anymore. No matter how dangerous things become, she wants to face them head-on. At the same time, Joo-hyung sneaks into the parking garage, breaks into Sungbim's car, and steals the remaining next pills. The following day, residents gather in the gym to vote on Sungbim's fate. Dong-hyun records the meeting while Ha-sung argues that the law supports removing infected residents from the building. Before fear can sway everyone, Saebom steps forward. She compares the situation to previous outbreaks and reminds everyone that illness can affect anyone. If they begin abandoning infected people, what happens when the next victim is someone they care about? Ha-sung pushes ahead with the vote anyway. Initially, no one supports expelling Sungbim. But when Ha-sung proposes isolating him on the rooftop instead, several residents change their minds. The vote ends in a tie after Soyun unexpectedly supports letting Sungbim stay. Ha-sung conveniently ignores Seo-yoon's vote altogether. Then Sehun suddenly appears wearing a full protective suit and casts the deciding vote in Sungbim's favor before casually leaving again. Young-ok immediately pretends she supported Sungbim all along, though Sungbim clearly doesn't believe her. With the vote settled, Yi-hyun proposes a monitoring schedule so residents can keep watch over Sungbim in pairs. Everyone hesitates until Hyun-kyung volunteers herself and Seminit. Elsewhere, Taisuk and Jisoo visit Chairman Choi. Both Choi and Taisuk's infected wife are estimated to have only about a month left before permanently losing control. Chairman Choi reveals that he no longer supports quarantine zones and orders Taisuk to cut food and electricity to infected areas. He dismisses countless deaths as insignificant while insisting he is somehow different from other infected patients. Back at the apartment complex, Ha-sung continues treating Soyun poorly, insulting her intelligence and expecting her to behave like a secretary. She quietly endures his cruelty. Meanwhile, Dong-hyun refuses to return Sungshil's phone and discovers a video she secretly recorded documenting her worsening wound. He quickly hides the footage before anyone notices. Later, Boram tells him she spotted his lost phone outside the building. Eager to retrieve it, Dong-hyun offers her money to bring it back. At the same time, Sehun explains his obsession with survival scenarios to Saebom. His fascination with disaster preparedness led him to stockpile survival gear and military equipment. He even invites her inside to see his collection. Downstairs, Young-ok visits Sungbim and leaves behind a bottle of water, telling him to drink it if he starts losing control. Afterward, Yi-hyun questions Sungbim and finally learns the name of another person connected to Next. Sehun. Outside, Boram searches for Dong-hyun's missing phone. She eventually finds it, but before she can return, the same infected resident from the neighboring building appears nearby. Terrified, she slowly retreats toward the apartment. At the same moment, Yi-hyun rushes home looking for Saebom, only to learn from Seo-yoon that she's upstairs with Sehun. He grabs a bat and races upstairs. Meanwhile, Hyun-kyung and Seminit begin arguing about money while monitoring Sungbim. Embarrassed that Sungbim can hear them, Hyun-kyung drags her brother into the hallway. Suddenly, they hear a loud crash. On the second floor, Boram and Dong-hyun burst through the entrance screaming as two infected attackers force their way inside. Seminit foolishly opens the stairwell door to investigate. A zombie immediately attacks from behind. Hyun-kyung watches in horror as her brother is bitten on the neck and dragged into the stairwell. She barely manages to escape back into the gym and barricade the doors. Upstairs, Yi-hyun pounds on Sehun's apartment door demanding to see Saebom. Sehun opens the door slightly with the chain still attached and calmly says she'll come out soon. Yi-hyun wedges his bat into the doorway and asks a single question. Did you take Next? Then he coldly warns Sehun that if anything happens to Saebom, he'll kill him. Sehun insists there's been a misunderstanding and opens the door to reveal Saebom casually eating snacks. Relieved but embarrassed, Yi-hyun checks her for injuries and finds she's completely fine. Despite Sehun's strange personality, Saebom is more interested in the free snacks he gives her before she leaves. Meanwhile, the infected resident wandering outside manages to sneak into the building and reaches Yi-hyun and Saebom's floor. Home alone, Seo-yoon cautiously answers the door with the safety chain still attached. The man claims to be a friend of her mother, but Seo-yoon immediately sees through the lie and locks the door. Moments later, Yi-hyun and Saebom encounter him in the hallway. The man insists he hasn't hurt anyone, then admits he only slightly bit somebody. Unimpressed, Yi-hyun gives him 3 seconds to run before chasing him out with a bat. After checking on Seo-yoon, the pair force him back outside and secure the entrance. Elsewhere, Sungbim convinces Hyun-kyung to remove his handcuffs. The moment he's free, he rushes to the water dispenser and desperately drinks. When Yi-hyun and Saebom discover him, Sungbim admits that no amount of water satisfies his thirst and that even seeing someone's neck triggers violent urges. As Yi-hyun attempts to restrain him, Sunbeam suddenly attacks. Bomb pulls him away, but the situation spirals out of control. A gunshot suddenly echoes through the gym. Taisuk appears and fires again, killing Sunbeam. Furious, Bomb confronts him for executing Sunbeam instead of trying to help him. Later, while Yi-hyun remains beside the body and quietly closes Sunbeam's eyes, Bomb drags Taisuk outside demanding answers. Taisuk finally reveals that the virus is still present in Bomb's blood, explaining why he insisted on monitoring her condition. He also reveals that Seo-yoon's father has been infected, though her mother is still alive. Because Seo-yoon misses her family, Taisuk plans to escort her out of the complex. Meanwhile, Jungkook, Woo Chang, and the cleaning crew hide inside apartment 202. When Yi-hyun knocks on the door, they hesitate to let him in, fearing he may be infected. Jungkook eventually opens the door and immediately clings to Yi-hyun in relief. The others claim they survived thanks to Woo Chang's cross frightening the infected away, though Yi-hyun clearly doubts that explanation. Instead, he focuses on a more important question: who opened the building door? Once everyone realizes he's healthy, suspicion immediately falls on Dong-hyun and Bo-ram. Elsewhere, Dong-hyun is busy recovering videos from his phone while Bo-ram worries about the trouble they've caused. Dong-hyun doesn't care as long as their stories match. When Yi-hyun confronts them, he realizes they endangered everyone just to recover a phone. Furious, he reminds them that someone is now missing because of their actions and that they should at least feel responsible. On the rooftop stairwell, Taisuk encounters Andrew, who calmly reveals that he already redirected 2 infected residents away from the building. Taisuk is surprised to discover the infected security guard quietly leaving instead of attacking anyone. Yi-hyun later joins Taisuk, who confirms there are currently no infected residents inside the apartment complex. Suminit likely left after being bitten. Although Yi-hyun criticizes Taisuk's ruthless decisions, Taisuk insists they're ultimately working toward the same goal. When Yi-hyun asks about Bomb's condition, Taisuk explains that she's safe for now unless her wound begins showing signs of infection. Yi-hyun wonders if anyone has ever fully recovered, but Taisuk reveals that every apparent recovery eventually relapsed. There is still no cure. Soon, Bomb gathers everyone for a meeting. Before heading downstairs, Taisuk privately speaks with Seo-yoon. He gently tells her that her parents miss her and offers to take her outside the quarantine zone. When Seo-yoon asks if Bomb can come too, Taisuk agrees and adds that Bomb's mother is waiting outside as well. Outside the apartment, Bomb quietly wonders what will happen if either she or Yi-hyun becomes infected. Yi-hyun promises he'll tell her if symptoms appear, and she promises to do the same. Meanwhile, residents gather in apartment 201, where arguments quickly break out. Young-ok is furious that someone arranged a meeting without consulting her. Most residents don't believe Andrew when he claims a soldier is present until Taisuk arrives himself. He then delivers devastating news. The entire city has been placed under lockdown, and electricity will be shut off that night. Panic immediately spreads through the room. Before anyone can process the announcement, alarms begin blaring outside. A public address system echoes across the city, announcing that martial law has officially been declared. As panic spreads through the apartment complex, Bomb and Yi-hyun step outside the meeting. Worried about Seo-yoon but also concerned about Yi-hyun checking the gym alone, Bomb hands him her gun and tells him not to hesitate if his life is in danger. Back inside, Taisuk explains that martial law and the lockdown are expected to last 4 more days. Electricity is being shut off because infected people reached the power plant, leaving only essential facilities operational. Hearing how bad conditions have become outside, many residents begin to realize the apartment complex may actually be the safest place available. Joo-hyung asks whether a drug caused the outbreak, and Taisuk's vague response only strengthens his suspicions. After the meeting, residents rush home to store water before the utilities are cut off. Back at the apartment, Seo-yoon admits she wants to see her parents but doesn't trust Taisuk because of his unusual interest in Bomb. Taking a letter Seo-yoon wrote for her parents, Bomb heads to the rooftop and confronts Taisuk directly. Pressed for answers, he finally reveals that researchers discovered an antibody in her blood. To properly study it, they may even need to expose her to infection again. Then, without warning, Taisuk shoots the rooftop doorknob and releases the infected security guard. Bomb struggles to fend off the infected man while Taisuk watches. Finally, he raises his gun. Despite Bomb begging him not to shoot, he fires. Downstairs, Yi-hyun hears the gunshot. While investigating, he discovers Sunbeam's body has disappeared. Security footage reveals soldiers removed the body after extracting the brain. At that moment, Yi-hyun realizes why Taisuk came to the apartment complex. It's because of Bomb. He immediately rushes toward the rooftop while Jungkook guards the elevator. Along the way, Yi-hyun briefly reassures Seo-yoon, who is worried after hearing the gunshot. When the elevator finally reaches the basement, Jungkook is stunned to find Taisuk carrying an unconscious, blood-covered Bomb while aiming a gun at him. Taisuk loads her into his vehicle and attempts to leave, but Yi-hyun pursues him all the way to the military barricade. He jumps onto the moving car, slides across the hood, and points his gun through the windshield. Soldiers quickly surround them. As Taisuk reaches for his weapon, Saebom suddenly wakes up and presses his own gun against his head. Shocked by how quickly she recovered from the tranquilizer, Taisuk orders the soldiers to stand down. Saebom agrees to cooperate on two conditions: Sunbeam's family must be informed of his death, and the apartment residents must continue receiving food supplies. She also asks about her mother. Jisoo assures her that her mother is safe because Taisuk arranged protection for her. Outside, Taisuk explains that many infected patients possess antibodies, but none can cross the blood-brain barrier. Saebom's antibody appears unique because it may be capable of reaching the brain itself. Understanding how valuable Saebom has become, Yi-hyun asks for weapons to help protect her. Taisuk warns that she could still develop symptoms at any time, but Yi-hyun insists that's exactly why he intends to stay with her. When Yi-hyun asks about his real motives, Taisuk admits the situation revolves around power and influence. Wealthy infected individuals would drain every drop of Saebom's blood if they learned she might hold the key to a cure. Before leaving, Yi-hyun warns Taisuk that he'll expose everything once the crisis ends. Taisuk quietly accepts the possibility. Back inside, Jungkook is relieved to see Saebom unharmed. Yi-hyun explains that the blood covering her wasn't hers before returning Jungkook's gun. Later, Yi-hyun and Saebom distribute food to residents and spend time together on the rooftop. Saebom admits Taisuk never truly intended to let the infected man kill her. When he fired, he deliberately aimed for the arm rather than the head. She still considers him dangerous, but also desperate. Elsewhere, Young Ok and Woo Chang discuss increasing their influence over the residents. They want someone respected enough to lead but easy enough to control. At that moment, Jungkook arrives to thank Woo Chang for supposedly saving his life and asks to pray together. Meanwhile, Haesung runs into Sang-hee while taking out the trash. She breaks down crying and finally admits that Joo-hyung murdered his wife. Terrified that he'll kill her too, she begs for protection. Eager to play the hero, Haesung immediately agrees. Back home, he spends the evening smiling to himself until Soyun notices lipstick on his cardigan. Elsewhere, Joo-hyung secretly injects dissolved next into several unopened water bottles using a syringe. At the same time, Taisuk orders Jisoo to continue testing Saebom's blood in a secure laboratory. He suspects the virus may already have affected her because rapid healing is one of the infection's key symptoms. Jisoo promises to keep Saebom's condition secret and reports that both of Seoyun's parents are infected. Taisuk quietly hands over Seoyun's letter for her mother. Elsewhere, Hak Jae surprises Sungshil by thanking her for keeping their supplies stocked and even allows Boram to stay with them. In apartment 401, Hyun Kyung receives a video call from Seminit, who is hiding in the parking garage. Though covered in blood, he remains conscious. Fighting back tears, he admits he's terrified and refuses to come inside because he might hurt her. Hyun Kyung desperately reassures him that researchers are working on a cure, but before he can respond, the electricity suddenly cuts out. At the same time, Jungkook stands alone on the rooftop reading messages from his wife, who is frightened about facing a hospital appointment without him. Meanwhile, Saebom, Yi-hyun, and Seoyun spend the blackout together by candlelight, sharing snacks like a family. Noticing Saebom staring nervously at her wound, Yi-hyun gently takes her hand and reassures her. Down in the dark parking garage, Seminit suddenly notices a bright flashlight shining from inside the building. Drawn toward it, he slowly approaches the doorway. When the door finally opens, all he can see is the silhouette of a man standing in the darkness. Moon-hee and Sekyu ask Young Ok for permission to move into an empty apartment on the 11th floor, worried they'll be vulnerable if zombies invade again. Young Ok refuses, but when they appeal to Saebom and Yi-hyun, the issue is brought before the residents. Haesung argues that occupying the apartment would be trespassing, while others suggest the cleaning couple stay in building 201 instead. Hak Jae objects, not wanting to be closest to any future attacks, and Joo-hyung crudely suggests the cleaners act as guards. Andrew quietly smiles at the remark. Afterward, Hyun Kyung privately tells Saebom and Yi-hyun that Seminit has been contacting her. She wonders if he might not be fully infected. Looking at her own wound, Saebom says there's still reason to hope. That night, rain begins falling just as Yi-hyun predicted. He and Saebom head to the rooftop to collect water and discover Jungkook sleeping there, clutching a cross and shouting at Satan in his dreams. Yi-hyun can only sigh at his sudden devotion. Meanwhile, Hyun Kyung sneaks to the lobby and spots Seminit outside. He admits he feels strange and isn't sure whether he's infected, but is afraid to come close to her. The next morning, Saebom and Yi-hyun find Andrew drinking from their rainwater supply. While Yi-hyun complains, Saebom doesn't mind. Sehun arrives to collect water and offers purification tablets, joking that Saebom should inform her husband first. Although Saebom believes someone as cautious as Sehun probably wouldn't take next, Yi-hyun remains suspicious. Later, the cleaning ajama discovers a bloody towel hidden in a trash bag between the 3rd and 4th floors. Investigating, Yi-hyun and Saebom first question Hyun Kyung, who proves she isn't injured. Assuming the blood belongs to Seminit, Yi-hyun and Jungkook search the garage and find a lunchbox, but Jungkook stops Yi-hyun from venturing further. He admits he's desperate to survive and return to his wife, whose cancer may have returned. That night, Yi-hyun reluctantly agrees there's little more they can do for Seminit. Moments later, they hear mysterious thudding sounds somewhere upstairs. Elsewhere, Taisuk receives encouraging news. Sung-young, one of the treatment subjects, is showing significant improvement. Although his personality has changed slightly, his thirst has disappeared. Taisuk orders Jisoo to report the successful trial while continuing to secretly analyze Saebom's blood. On the final day of quarantine, Hyun-kyung secretly visits apartment 1102 carrying food. Saebom and Yi-hyun catch her coming out and discover Seminit hiding inside. Seminit reveals that Joo-hyung supplied him with food and even offered to bring him back inside, but he refused because he feared hurting others. Although angry they hid the truth, Yi-hyun and Saebom ultimately decide to leave Seminit where he is until medical help arrives after the lockdown ends. Elsewhere, Dong-hyun confides to Boram that he suspects his mother is infected because of her wound and the strange noises he heard during the night. Boram scolds him for caring more about himself than his parents. That evening, Saebom talks about visiting her mother as soon as the quarantine ends. Reflecting on Seminit's condition, she remembers Taisuk saying that infected people may be able to control their thirst through sheer willpower. The following morning, residents gather in the gym despite communication services still being down. They discover a cooler full of drinks waiting for them. Joo-hyung conveniently appears and suggests Young-ok provided the refreshments, knowing she'll gladly take the credit. Only Yi-hyun looks suspicious, especially when Joo-hyung personally offers him a bottle. While checking the perimeter, Yi-hyun stops Saebom from drinking anything until they're sure it's safe. Nothing outside appears to have changed. Meanwhile, Dong-hyun hears the mysterious thudding again, this time coming from behind a locked door in his apartment. Before he can investigate, a citywide announcement reveals that martial law is being extended indefinitely. Panic spreads immediately. Joo-hyung quietly leaves the gym and returns home, where he finds Ha-sung meeting privately with Sang-hee. Realizing something suspicious is developing between them, he watches carefully. After Ha-sung leaves, Joo-hyung urgently stops Sang-hee from drinking one of the bottled drinks. Back in the gym, Dong-hyun suddenly accuses his mother of being infected. He reveals she has a wound on her back and claims the nighttime noises were coming from her room. Hak-jae insists it's only psoriasis, while Boram supports his explanation, but many residents still want proof. Refusing to let anyone inspect his wife, Hak-jae promises that he and Sung-shil will quarantine themselves inside their apartment. Boram returns with them, clearly disgusted by Dong-hyun's behavior. As tensions rise, Young-ok proposes distributing the emergency supplies stored in Building 201. Her argument quickly turns into an attack on the cleaning couple, insisting they should be grateful simply to be allowed to stay there. Frustrated by her growing abuse of authority, Saebom and Yi-hyun decide it's time to do something about Young-ok's power trip. Meanwhile, Hak-jae sends Boram away for her safety and encourages her to stay with Saebom and Yi-hyun. Meanwhile, he returns home and pretends everything is normal around Sung-shil despite growing concerns about her condition. Determined to expose Young-ok, Saebom and Yi-hyun force their way into her apartment. Inside, they notice the sparse furnishings and cheap appliances, as if she and Woo-chang never intended to stay permanently. Yi-hyun confronts her about the water bottle she gave Sunbeam and accuses her of using him to strengthen her campaign for resident representative and profit from future contracts. Young-ok denies everything and demands proof. Although Yi-hyun can't directly prove it, Saebom promises she will never become resident representative. As they leave, they run into Jungkook on his way to pray with Woo-chang. Saebom worries he's falling under their influence, but Yi-hyun argues that people naturally look for something to rely on during difficult times. Meanwhile, Joo-hyung visits Building 201 to buy water. Sekyu charges him an outrageous price, and he and Moon-hee decide they might as well profit from the wealthy residents while they can. Elsewhere, Young-ok begins growing suspicious of Saebom's unhealed wound and Taisuk's unusual behavior. During prayer, she questions Jungkook about it, clearly fishing for information. Back at the apartment, Yi-hyun shows Saebom supplies he received from Jisoo, including snacks and a military radio. When Jungkook arrives, they hide the radio, but it's obvious he's already troubled by what he knows. Privately, he asks Saebom about her injury. She reassures him, but he remains uneasy. That night, Dong-hyun sneaks into his apartment to steal food and water before begging the residents of Building 201 to let him stay. The cleaning kdrama eventually gives him her room and leaves with some supplies. Before she goes, Andrew warns her to be careful because people are becoming increasingly cruel. Touched by his concern, she becomes emotional when he gives her an apple. Meanwhile, Joo-hyung secretly leads Young-ok to apartment 1102. Having seen Hyun-kyung visiting the apartment, he knows someone is hiding there. He sends Young-ok inside while remaining safely near the door. Moments later, her scream confirms the truth. At the same time, Yi-hyun and Saebom test the radio but fail to reach anyone. Their conversation turns personal when Sae-bom asks what helped Yi-hyun through losing his baseball career. He quietly admits that it was her. The moment almost becomes romantic before Young Ok and Joo-hyung interrupt, demanding answers about the person hidden in apartment 1102. Inside, Seminit finally reveals himself. Though frightened and emotional, he appears surprisingly stable. He insists he hasn't harmed anyone and begs them to save him so he can see his children again. Rather than abandon him, Yi-hyun and Sae-bom place him under observation in the gym. Before being taken away, Seminit reveals an important detail: he wasn't responsible for the strange thudding noises everyone has been hearing. Outside, Young Ok attempts to pressure Yi-hyun and Sae-bom into supporting her leadership ambitions. She points out that both of them had contact with infected people and could easily become targets themselves. She also suggests they're too soft to deal with someone like Joo-hyung. Instead, Yi-hyun and Sae-bom confront Joo-hyung directly. He offers them bottled drinks and challenges them to prove they're not infected by drinking them. Yi-hyun agrees, but only after switching bottles with Joo-hyung and forcing him to drink as well. Meanwhile, Woo-chang and Young Ok continue manipulating Jungkook, encouraging him to create order by isolating anyone who might be infected. Back in Joo-hyung's apartment, the truth finally comes out. After vomiting in the bathroom, Joo-hyung reveals the remaining next pills and admits he secretly contaminated the drinks distributed to residents. His primary targets were Yi-hyun and Sae-bom, while everyone else was simply collateral damage. He argues that creating more patients will speed up treatment development. To Sae-bom's horror, Yi-hyun casually swallows one of the pills. Then he reveals the truth. Earlier, he anticipated Joo-hyung's scheme and secretly replaced the drugs with ordinary digestive medicine. Joo-hyung lunges at Yi-hyun, but Sae-bom quickly takes him down. With dashcam footage proving he stole the pills and his own confession exposing the poisoning plot, they finally have evidence against him. They drag Joo-hyung into the hallway, only to find Jungkook waiting with a gun. Unable to even look them in the eye, Jungkook insists he cannot afford to become infected. Backed by Young Ok, he argues that Yi-hyun and Sae-bom should be quarantined because Sae-bom was scratched and both of them have repeatedly come into contact with infected people. Elsewhere, Chairman Choi and several wealthy infected individuals eagerly receive the new treatment. Convinced they've secured their survival, they discuss maintaining martial law and quarantine zones to reduce the number of infected people competing for treatment. Taisuk appears to agree. Then he turns the situation against them. When Chairman Choi becomes suspicious and sends security after him, Taisuk brutally fights back. As blood is spilled, the supposedly treated patients begin showing signs of infection once again. The second clinical trial has failed. Rather than kill the infected patients, Taisuk orders them kept alive for further study, allowing Jisoo to believe the treatment was stolen without anyone realizing it failed. Later, Taisuk sits beside his infected wife and gently holds her hand. When she says she's thirsty, he breaks down in tears and promises they're close to finding a cure. Young Ok storms into Sae-bom and Yi-hyun's apartment with a guilty Jungkook behind her. Meanwhile, Joo-hyung searches the place for the next pills Yi-hyun confiscated. He claims he wants them as insurance in case he gets bitten since the pills seem to keep his wife alive after her severe injury. Joo-hyung even suggests taking care of Seo-yoon because he likes kids, but thankfully no one tries to take her away. After forcing her way inside, Young Ok joins the anxious residents in the hallway. Furious, Sae-bom steps out and sarcastically suggests they hold their meeting about her and Yi-hyun at Young Ok's apartment instead. Yi-hyun quickly calms her down and leads her back inside. Jungkook follows, asking if she truly feels fine. Sae-bom simply tells him she's disappointed in him. Her remark works. The residents decide to meet at Young Ok's apartment, leaving her no choice but to host them. Before the meeting, Yi-hyun reassures Jungkook that Sae-bom is healthy and warns him not to trust the others. Inside, everyone is surprised by how empty Young Ok's apartment is. As they discuss evicting Sae-bom and Yi-hyun to seize their supplies, Andrew slips away to warn them. Sae-bom leaves Seo-yoon with Yi-hyun and rushes upstairs, still carrying her apple-peeling knife. She arrives just as Jungkook argues for letting them stay. The situation explodes when Joo-hyung tries to grab Jungkook's gun. Sae-bom knocks him down, but Jungkook points the gun at her. She effortlessly disarms him and turns the weapon on Joo-hyung. Though he challenges her to shoot, he panics when she pulls the trigger. Humiliated after wetting himself, he learns the first round in a police weapon is a blank. Sae-bom then proposes a test. Since infected people react to blood, she raises her knife to cut herself. Yi-hyun stops her and slices his own hand instead. Ignoring Sae-bom's attempts to bandage him, he walks past everyone while blood drips from the wound. No one reacts, until Boram suddenly turns. As panic erupts, Sae-bom and Yi-hyun tackle and restrain her while everyone else backs away in fear. After moving her to the gym office, Sae-bom leaves Jungkook on guard duty and takes Yi-hyun away to treat his hand. When Boram regains control, Yi-hyun tells Sae-bom to check on her while he heads home. Instead, he visits Young Ok's apartment, where the residents are still gathered. Boram reveals she was infected at the supermarket and thanks Sae-bom for stopping her from biting anyone there. Before leaving, Sae-bom asks about the bloodstained towel, but Boram says she didn't throw it away. Later, Jungkook and Boram hear noises from the driving range where Seminit is being held. Woo Chang is there trying to pressure Seminit into claiming Sae-bom is infected. His confidence disappears the moment Sae-bom arrives. As the meeting ends, only Soyun politely thanks Yi-hyun for everything he's done. Back home, Woo Chang discovers blood in his apartment. After drinking some water, he begins cleaning the blood with his tongue before regaining control when Young Ok enters. Sae-bom reaches home before Yi-hyun and glares at him when he finally arrives. He explains that instead of resting, he wanted to check whether anyone else was infected. Jungkook soon appears, overwhelmed with guilt. Sae-bom and Yi-hyun forgive him, asking only that he come directly to them if he has concerns again. While Jungkook watches Sae-yoon, Sae-bom treats Yi-hyun's wound and scolds him for being reckless. She had only planned a small cut, while he nearly sliced his hand open. She admits she was so worried she lost her appetite. Yi-hyun replies that he felt the same watching her stand alone against everyone with that knife. The next day, Boram is brought to the gym as the residents gather for another test. Andrew immediately volunteers, slashing his arm without hesitation. His blood is placed before each resident, and this time nobody reacts. While arguments continue, Jisoo informs Taisuk that severe patients are mutating and can suppress their thirst to hide symptoms. Taisuk visits Chairman Choi, who is barely stable under heavy sedation. Mockingly, Taisuk tells him his funeral was successful and shows him a photo. He also notes that Choi may be honored for his role in the clinical trials while his family remains unaware of the hidden slush fund. Chairman Choi warns Taisuk that the government will discard him once they no longer need him. Afterward, Taisuk reviews Sae-bom's blood results and concludes they need more mutated patients. He admits the apartment lockdown exists to study how the infection evolves and orders Jisoo to slightly open the perimeter so an infected person can slip inside and be captured. Meanwhile, Sae-bom visits Sehun for supplies to house Boram on the rooftop. He provides a tent, food, and water. Boram requests only a small amount of water, explaining that drinking too much worsens the thirst. Realizing this may reveal other infected residents, Sae-bom starts thinking back to who avoided drinking at previous gatherings. At the driving range, Yi-hyun and Jungkook deliver food to Seminit. He asks them to keep their distance because being near people increases his thirst. However, he notes that Woo Chang never triggered that reaction. Yi-hyun recalls Jungkook mentioning that infected people never attacked Woo Chang, supposedly because of his holiness. The observation clearly gives him something to think about. Upstairs, Woo Chang continues praying, but it does nothing to suppress his growing thirst. Meanwhile, Young Ok patrols the building searching for more infected residents. Carrying a cup of Andrew's blood, she has begun testing everyone she encounters. Young Ok sets the cup of blood on the counter, instantly capturing Woo Chang's attention. His focus soon shifts to her neck. The moment she leaves the room, he drinks the blood. When Young Ok returns and finds him covered in blood, she screams. At the same time, Sae-bom tells Yi-hyun that Woo Chang never drank at the gathering. Yi-hyun adds that infected people seem uninterested in him, strengthening their suspicions. They rush to Young Ok's apartment, where she has locked herself inside a room. Woo Chang insists it's all a misunderstanding before admitting Sungbin gave him next. He hid the truth because he knew Young Ok would throw him out. He reveals has been struggling to suppress the infection and has even resorted to drinking his own blood. Even after hearing this, Young Ok is more concerned about how the situation will affect her chances of becoming resident representative. She tells him to lock himself in his room while she claims he's merely sick. When he doesn't answer, she opens the door and discovers he's gone. This time, Sae-bom remains calm while Yi-hyun loses his patience. He pounds on Young Ok's door, then forces his way inside despite her protests. Sae-bom checks the hallways. Woo Chang races downstairs and spots Jungkook in the stairwell. He flees to the 6th floor, where Joo-hyung happens to be outside. At that moment, Woo Chang fully turns. Terrified, Joo-hyung bolts into his apartment, ignoring Ha-sung and Sang-hee, and locks himself in his room without even closing the front door. As Woo Chang advances, Ha-sung hides behind Sang-hee. Sae-bom arrives just in time and tackles Woo Chang to the ground. Yi-hyun follows moments later and finds Woo Chang pinning Sae-bom down. He tears off his bandage and reopens his wound, using the blood to lure Woo Chang away. Together, he and Sae-bom overpower him, tie his hands, and cover his head with a blanket to help him calm down. Unnoticed by everyone, Joo-hyung remains hidden in his room. After the others leave, he sneaks out and removes the blanket. Standing beside the open window, he ducks at the last second as Woo Chang charges forward and plunges out the window. Hearing the impact, Sae-bom and Yi-hyun rush back and look down to see Woo Chang's body below. Young Ok arrives moments later, staring in shock. "You killed him," she says. Yi-hyun later finds Joo-hyung hiding in his room, but as expected, he pretends to know nothing about what happened. Meanwhile, Ha-sung and Sang-hee flee to the 11th floor. Ha-sung suggests asking So-yoon to shelter Sang-hee, but she rejects the idea. Instead, she reminds him they need Joo-hyung's password so they can access the money he invested in cryptocurrency. Back home, Ha-sung claims he was on the rooftop, conveniently forgetting Bo-ram is staying there. He quickly changes the subject and asks where So-yoon would hide an important password. She replies that she would either memorize it or store it somewhere only she could access. Later, Sang-hee notices a tattoo on Joo-hyung's shoulder before he covers it. At home, Sae-bom rebandages Yi-hyun's hand and warns him not to repeat what he did. She's clearly shaken. Taking her hand, Yi-hyun reassures her that Woo-chang's death wasn't their fault. Although she agrees, she still can't stop thinking about it. Yi-hyun understands why Woo-chang hid his condition. He was likely terrified and convinced he could survive until a cure was found. More than anything, he was probably afraid the person closest to him would begin to fear him. That night, young Ok sits alone in darkness. She repeatedly looks out the window toward the spot where Woo-chang fell. Later, she hears a knock and rushes to the door, hoping it's him, but no one is there. The next morning, loud banging wakes Sae-bom. Yi-hyun is already speaking with the residents of 201, who have finally learned about Woo-chang. They ask for water, knowing Sae-bom and Yi-hyun still have supplies. Andrew immediately exposes everyone, revealing that the others already tried convincing Sehun to share his water. Sekyu and Moon-hee insist Bo-ram willingly gave them some and claim they found Sehun's apartment number on a supply container. To prevent unrest, Sae-bom and Yi-hyun visit Sehun. They find him seated on an actual throne atop a platform, receiving visitors like a king. Though reluctant to share his resources, Sehun offers valuable information. Building 103 contains an emergency generator capable of restoring power and water. The downside is that the noise will attract infected people. Before they leave, he reluctantly promises to see what supplies he can spare. Sae-bom is so grateful that she tries to shake his hand, but Yi-hyun quickly intercepts and shakes it himself, much to Sehun's annoyance. To keep tensions under control, Sae-bom and Yi-hyun decide to distribute some of their own supplies. Elsewhere, Taisuk sits beside his wife, Young-in. Concerned about their unborn child, she wants to proceed with delivery, but Taisuk fears the baby may share her infection. He promises he won't give up on their child. Outside the room, Jisoo quietly tells him they can't postpone the birth any longer. Taisuk admits that, if it would save Young-in, he would even sacrifice the baby. When Jisoo asks who he would choose if forced to decide, Taisuk says there is only one answer. Jisoo then reveals the results of Sae-bom's blood tests. She possesses the antibodies they've been searching for. Back at the apartment complex, Sae-bom heads upstairs to give Sehun an FBI t-shirt as a gift. As soon as she leaves, he enters the bathroom and pulls down his collar, revealing an infected scratch left by Woo-chang. At that moment, static crackles through the two-way radio. Taisuk's voice calls out. Yi-hyun answers quietly, "I'm listening." Sae-bom heads to visit Sehun and sees his door is open a crack. While she cautiously enters, Taisuk contacts Yi-hyun. He lies that Sae-bom's blood doesn't have the antibodies and instead encourages them to send Seo-yoon out. They're trying to get minors out of lockdown. Yi-hyun asks if Sae-bom can leave with Seo-yoon. Taisuk agrees under the condition she cooperate with his work. Yi-hyun says he'll get in touch after talking with Sae-bom and disconnects. Taisuk observes to Jisoo that it's not like Yi-hyun to send Sae-bom out and senses something's off. On Yi-hyun's way upstairs, Sae-bom comes running and says there's trouble. Yi-hyun takes a subtle step back from her when she gets too close. She takes him to Sehun's and shows him a note. Sehun writes he committed a major wrong and couldn't endure anymore, so he left. He says to let everyone share his food and water. The handwriting doesn't quite match the writing on his water container, and he left behind his phone and wallet. They rifle through his things, and Yi-hyun finds a pill container with next. Everything almost too neatly points to him being infected. In the hall, they run into Sekyu and Moon-hee who are hanging around to swipe Sehun's supplies. Yi-hyun and Sae-bom send them back for now and keep Sehun's disappearance a secret. Sae-bom doesn't see why a recluse would leave home and thinks foul play is likely. Yi-hyun and Sae-bom can't find Sehun anywhere in the building, and the lobby door is unlocked. They head back up to 1501 and find the residents gathered. Andrew testifies that he saw Sehun leave the building this morning wearing his hazmat suit. Since everyone is running out of water, Sae-bom and Yi-hyun eventually let everyone into Sehun's. They only let each person take what they need, stopping everyone, especially greedy Sekyu, from cleaning out the place. Joo-hyun is mad Yi-hyun didn't give the rich residents a greater portion of supplies and balks when Sang-hee claims Yi-hyun divided things fairly. He then asks Sang-hee if she noticed anything strange about Yi-hyun. He seemed to be sticking closer to Sae-bom than usual. They're interrupted by a knock on the door. Young Ok and Sekyu think leaving all that stuff in Sehun's apartment would be a waste. Joo-hyun lets them in to discuss the situation and makes Sang-hee stand in the hall. At home, Seo-yoon guesses that Sehun must have left because he was lonely. She saw something on TV about people with no friends or family dying alone. She worries about her parents, but Sae-bom assures her they're okay. Sae-bom pour everyone some water, but Yi-hyun leaves his untouched all day. Sae-bom wakes to find Yi-hyun gone. She wakes up Jungkook, but he doesn't know where Yi-hyun went. Out in the hall, Yi-hyun sits on the floor, lost in thought. When Sae-bom comes out and sees the radio in his hand, she assumes he was talking to Taisuk. He tells her she doesn't have the antibodies. Sae-bom notices the cut on his hand is bleeding again and drags him inside to treat it. As she checks his wound, he tells her about Taisuk's proposal to send Sae-yoon out. He suggests she go with her, but Sae-bom says he should come too. Anyway, she's hesitant to send Sae-yoon out when they don't know how dangerous it is out there. Yi-hyun apparently asked about Sehun, and Taisuk said he'd look into it. But Sae-bom has another idea. What if he tried to leave but got scared and returned? Sehun could be hiding in the empty 1102. They creep into 1102 and indeed find Sehun's water bottle. Then, they hear some interesting noises. Sae-bom bangs on the door and tells the couple to come out. Ha-sung and Sang-hee stumble out after their legal consultation. Sae-bom encourages him to tell his wife, if trust is broken in a marriage, it won't last long. Yi-hyun hands over the water bottle, but Sang-hee says it's not theirs. They open another door, and Sae-bom spots someone under a blanket. The gnats buzzing around aren't a good sign. She removes the blanket and reveals a very dead cleaning kdrama. She's been bitten on the neck, and her body is covered in lime powder. Yi-hyun and Sae-bom recall they found a bag of lime in Sehun's apartment. Reluctantly, Sae-bom goes to get the only doctor in the building. While Yi-hyun questions Ha-sung and Sang-hee who were too busy to notice anything suspect, Sae-bom brings Ju-hyung to look at the body. Elsewhere, Hyun-kyung sits with Seminit who again asks her to take care of his family if he doesn't make it. Andrew comes in with bags of food, saying he wants to return the favor since Hyun-kyung gave him food before. Upstairs, Ju-hyung proves he really is a doctor. He notes that the cleaning kdrama has been dead for at least 2 days, and the lime was used to try to cover the odor. When he asks if Ha-sung and Sang-hee discovered the body together, Sang-hee makes up an obvious lie to hide the affair. Ju-hyung subtly threatens Ha-sung by saying he's worried about how shocked So-yoon will be if she finds out. In the hall, Moon-hee and Sekyu are in an uproar because Andrew stole their food. Yi-hyun and Sae-bom reveal that the cleaning kdrama is dead. Young-ok immediately assumes this was the wrongdoing Sehun mentioned in his note. Sae-bom and Yi-hyun remind everyone there's no evidence Sehun is the culprit. Yi-hyun tells Ha-sung and Sang-hee he'll take their witness statements later. So-yoon stares in shock at her husband and scoffs. Jungkook comes upstairs with Hyun-kyung and Andrew who asks if the cleaning kdrama is really dead. Sekyu punches Andrew in the face. Still only concerned with his stolen supplies, elsewhere, Taisuk's wife turns and they can't get her lucid again. When Taisuk goes for the vial of the treatment from Sae-bom's blood, Jisoo tries to stop him. If he takes it, the higher-ups will know Sae-bom is vital to the cure. Taisuk can't see beyond his wife being in danger and takes the sample from his underlings at gunpoint. He injects Youngin with the treatment, and she immediately stabilizes. Jisoo warns that headquarters will find out, but Taisuk has a plan, tell them first. They'll report Sae-bom's antibodies and that the treatment was successful on his wife. He'll make sure to get Sae-bom here by tomorrow. At the apartment, Yi-hyun and Sae-bom discuss what they know about the cleaning kdrama's death. He relays that Andrew was the last person to see her, and based on Ju-hyung's estimation, she must have died not long after. Jungkook comes in and downs a glass of water. Sae-bom notices when Yi-hyun looks away, but she says nothing. Sae-bom and Yi-hyun decide to keep the peace by divvying up Sehun's food, but they only let one unit in at a time and monitor how much is taken. On his way back, Dong-hyun shows a rare moment of care for his parents and leaves his box of food outside their door. In 602, Ha-sung tries to convince So-yoon he was just giving Sang-hee a consultation, but she's not naive enough to buy that. Meanwhile, Yi-hyun lets Andrew stay at Sehun's place. Once everyone leaves, we get this ominous music as Andrew sits on Sehun's throne. When Sae-bom and Yi-hyun arrive home, they find Se-yoon having a coughing fit. She usually gets a shot at the hospital for her symptoms, but she smiles and says she'll be fine. Thinking of Se-yoon's health, Sae-bom and Yi-hyun decide it's better to send her outside after all. Young-ok holds a meeting in the gym about security. With the cleaning kdrama dead, that means there's another infected resident attacking people. Everyone starts fighting about who should bleed themselves this time, and Sekyu even runs at Ju-hyung with a knife. During the chaos, Yi-hyun hears a ringing in his ears and closes his eyes in pain. Sae-bom looks over with concern. Yi-hyun pulls himself together and interjects to say that he and Sae-bom are planning to go outside to get more food and water. They grow suspicious when Ju-hyung parrots what Sehun told them about there being an emergency power source in the basement they can use for electricity and water. He argues that's a better option than going outside. Lest we think he has a shred of humanity, Ju-hyung clarifies that the trip would be fruitless if they go out and don't make it back with supplies. Despite the danger, Yi-hyun decides he'll turn on the power source since it's their only option. He tells Sae-bom they can first send out Se-yoon. Sae-bom wonders what to tell her, but Yi-hyun suggests keeping it secret for now. If Se-yoon knows she's leaving alone, she might refuse. Se-bom worries the noise of the generator will draw the zombies, trapping Yi-hyun. He assures her he'll be fine. Early the next morning, Yi-hyun goes into the stairwell and contacts Taisuk. He says Se-bom and Se-yoon will be in the parking garage this afternoon, ready to leave. Taisuk is surprised Yi-hyun isn't coming with them, but he says someone needs to keep an eye on things. He asks Taisuk to help Se-bom and Se-yoon live well. When they disconnect, Taisuk somberly tells Jisoo that Yi-hyun must be infected. Later that morning, Se-bom pulls Yi-hyun aside. She knows something is wrong. She reminds him of their promise to tell each other if they are sick. "Are you okay?" she asks seriously. Yi-hyun lies that he's fine, but Se-bom isn't convinced. The cut on his hand healed way too fast, and he hasn't been drinking water. He takes off the bandage to prove his cut hasn't healed. In a flashback, we see that he reopened the wound. Se-bom sighs in relief and takes the two-way radio from him. She instructs Taisuk to prepare antibiotics and bandages for them since Yi-hyun got hurt. When Taisuk gives an update that Sehun isn't outside, they decide to look through the building one more time. Given Sehun's proclivity for survival gear, Se-bom suggests he could have some secret room or bunker in his apartment. They let themselves in when Andrew doesn't answer the door. While Yi-hyun leaves to look for Andrew, Se-bom checks out the apartment. She gets a communication from Jisoo over the radio. They found something strange in a background check on the residence. While Se-bom learns that on Gukjin, Andrew's birth name, was found dead in his home, Yi-hyun finds Sehun's body in the same condition as the cleaning ajumas. Se-bom goes through Andrew's backpack and finds both Sehun and Deoksun's IDs. Yi-hyun runs in to tell her he found Sehun. Downstairs, Jungkook heads to the door when he hears incessant knocking. Hasung says he saw zombie Sehun and needs help. Jungkook takes out his gun and fully opens the door. Andrew forces his way in and attacks Jungkook. Upstairs, Se-bom and Yi-hyun hear a gunfire. Se-yoon sits crying with Andrew opposite her. He forces her to play Jenga with him like nothing has happened. Outside the apartment, Young Ok and her crew, Ju-hyung, the 201 couple, and Hasung, have gathered to take Yi-hyun and Se-bom's supplies. Se-bom and Yi-hyun rush past them into their apartment. Yi-hyun sees Jungkook's body and runs to him in a panic. Se-bom turns to Andrew, who's sitting on their couch with Jungkook's gun in front of him. Se-bom asks who he is. He finally takes off his hat, goggles, and mask to reveal his true face. In the hall, everyone waits nervously. This was Ju-hyung's plan, and everyone else claims they didn't know Andrew was the killer. Inside, Andrew reveals his face now that his ruse is up. He takes Se-yoon hostage, and since he has a gun, there's nothing Se-bom can do but promise Se-yoon she'll come for her. Everyone outside is surprised to see Andrew without the mask. He orders them all to the gym and says he'll bring Se-bom and Yi-hyun down. They want their food now, but no one dares defy the killer with a gun. He orders Hasung to stay behind. When the gang in cahoots with Andrew meets Hyun-kyung and So-yoon in the stairwell, they hide what's going on upstairs. Young Ok convinces the women to go with them to the gym so they don't find out about the group's betrayal of Se-bom and Yi-hyun. While Se-bom treats Jungkook's stab wound, Yi-hyun shakes from both the effort of holding himself back and his fear for Jungkook. Se-bom steadies him and vows to put everyone responsible away once they leave. Yi-hyun steps aside and radios Taisuk to explain the situation. He warns that Se-yoon will be in danger if Taisuk storms in. Yi-hyun also shares that he knows Taisuk lied to him and that Se-bom has the antibodies, which Taisuk basically admits. Andrew leaves Se-yoon in Hasung's care and goes back inside the apartment. Yi-hyun confronts him, having recognized his face from a police station wanted poster. He asks how many people Andrew has killed. In flashback, we see him kill on Gukjin and steal his identity. We also see him kill the cleaning ajumma. Andrew argues he's no different than the infected who hide their true nature and wait to strike. In the gym, Ju-hyung reveals he saw Andrew dragging away the cleaning ajumma's body. Andrew went to kill him too, but Ju-hyung made himself useful by suggesting he hide the body in that empty apartment. He even gave him the idea of making it look like she was bitten. Ju-hyung went to Young Ok immediately afterwards, and they struck a deal to let Andrew do whatever he wanted so long as he helped them with problem residents. Back in the apartment, Andrew explains he got Sehun to open the door by saying Se-bom was hurt and needed supplies. He then forced him to write that letter. That's when Ju-hyung saw the bag of lime in the apartment and suggested Andrew use it to cover the smell. Andrew takes Se-bom and Yi-hyun down to the gym and passes their radio over to Young Ok. She begs for help, but Taisuk ignores her communication. Everyone is horrified to realize Se-bom and Yi-hyun have had contact with the outside this whole time and could have reported on their criminal actions. Young Ok tries to take control of the situation and reminds everyone that Yi-hyun and Se-bom agreed to turn on the emergency generator. Andrew tells everyone that they can just blame everything on the crazy man with a gun. Hyun-kyung bravely stands up to him and asks if they're supposed to turn a blind eye to his crimes. Hyun-kyung holds her ground. When he puts the gun to her chest, Se-bom intervenes. Once Andrew lets Hyun-kyung go, Se-bom sends her out and asks So-yoon to watch Se-yoon. Andrew says he'll let Jungkook and Se-yoon go once Yi-hyun and Se-bom come back from turning on the power. Upstairs, Jungkook tries to convince Se-yoon he's okay despite the gaping wound in his side. Ha-sung goes to take Se-yoon to his apartment, but she isn't keen on leaving. So-yoon arrives and confronts Ha-sung, asking if he helped Andrew. She's shocked that her husband, who used to be a dedicated public defender, would do something like this, but Ha-sung argues he got nothing in return for his goodness. While they argue, smart little Se-yoon goes over and grabs a backpack with Yi-hyun's military supplies. Se-yoon pointedly says she'll go with So-yoon and wants Jungkook to join them, but he's too injured to move. In a surprising move, Dong-hyun offers to go with Se-bom and Yi-hyun to turn on the power. He admits to them that he wants to get to his car and try to leave, even if he has to drive through the barricade. They wish him good luck and head on their mission, entering the garage and locating the electrical room. Se-bom locates the generator, and Yi-hyun flips the switch. Once the power comes on, they leave before the infected can swarm. They seem to be in the clear, but then zombies come flying into the garage from all directions. Yi-hyun leads Se-bom into a different, connected building in case Andrew is lying in wait to kill them when they return. Two zombies bang on the glass doors, and Yi-hyun stares at them intensely. Se-bom has to take his hand and lead him away. Meanwhile, zombies surround Dong-hyun's car, which won't start. Upstairs, Young-ok politely suggests Andrew give her the gun. Joo-hyun wants to make sure he's going to kill Se-bom and Yi-hyun, but Young-ok's main concern is to ensure his leaving the second lockdown is lifted and will take full responsibility for everything. Andrew agrees on both counts. In the elevator, Yi-hyun assures Se-bom that Taisuk will help them leave. He shares that Taisuk was only using Se-yoon as an excuse to get Se-bom out because she has the antibodies. The elevator's doors open, and multiple zombies try to rush inside. Yi-hyun pushes them out and yells at Se-bom to stay inside the elevator. He stands outside the door, holding them back with his body. Se-bom yells at him to get in, his shirt rips, revealing his infected scratch. Se-bom stares in shock and notices how the zombies are trying to move past Yi-hyun without attacking him. She snaps out of it and yanks Yi-hyun inside. Yi-hyun apologizes for not telling her and breaking his promise. He didn't want her to see him like this. As he hangs his head, Se-bom takes slow steps toward him. She places one hand on his chest and with the other, caresses his face. He cautions her to stay back. When he sees her, his heart beats faster and he feels thirst. Me too, because I like you, she confesses. Se-bom pulls him close as they both cry. When the elevator doors open, she says they'll leave together. Elsewhere, Jisa lets Taisuk know that they turned on the generator in the complex. He orders her to temporarily remove the garage barricade so they can get Se-bom out and to fire on anyone who threatens her. While Se-bom and Yi-hyun have Boram let them in through the roof, Joo-hyun and Young-ok clean out their food supply. They decide to let the police handle Andrew later. They can just claim they didn't know he was a murderer. Joo-hyun goes looking for the next pills Yi-hyun confiscated, and in the process, he jokes with Jungkook by freaking smothering him briefly with a pillow. Meanwhile, Hyun-kyung visits Seminit and tells him about the Andrew situation. He advises her to stay out of it, but she feels bad after all Se-bom and Yi-hyun have done for them. In 601, Sang-hee tries to connect to the internet, to steal Joo-hyun's money, but it's still not up. When Joo-hyun checks the laptop to see what she's up to, Sang-hee sneaks up behind him and bashes him upside the head with the golf club. In 602, So-yoon convinces Ha-sung to go down to 501 to get them some food and water. Once he's out the door, she quickly takes out the batteries in the keypad lock and locks the door. He bangs on the door, but she yells that she's sick of his selfishness. While Se-bom picks up Se-yoon from 602, Yi-hyun goes to get Jungkook. Young-ok tries to attack him with a bat, but he easily overpowers her. She demands to know if he's going to kill her like he did her husband and lets out agonized screams. Yi-hyun locks her in the bathroom and tells her he'll be back for her, he's not going anywhere. He retrieves Jungkook and meets Se-bom on the 6th floor. So-yoon is surprised when Se-bom invites her to leave with them. She thanks Ha-sung for opening her eyes and tosses her wedding ring at him as the elevator doors close. Andrew finally realizes something is amiss and runs upstairs. He instructs the cleaning couple to detain Se-bom and Yi-hyun if they see them. Instead, Sekyu rushes him and beats him with a mop. They tussle and land in the elevator as Sekyu tries to wrestle the gun from Andrew. Moon-hee tries to help her husband, but they are no match for the vicious Andrew who stabs Sekyu in the neck. Andrew warns Moon-hee not to pull the knife out or her husband will die. He then makes his way to the roof and catches our group, which now also includes Boram, trying to leave. Before he can shoot Se-bom, Yi-hyun tosses out a smoke grenade. Andrew manages to get off a shot and hits Yi-hyun in the arm before the group gets to the safety of the stairwell. Se-bom's eyes widen to see his arm covered in blood. Yi-hyun apologizes for not being able to accompany her and runs back through the door, locking it with the handcuffs. Through the crack, he tells Se-bom that he was truly happy being with her. Andrew shoots Yi-hyun again. Se-bom screams and tries to break down the door. When Andrew sticks his gun through the door crack, SAE-bomb warns him not to touch Yi-hyun, she'll be back. While SAE-bomb leads everyone down to the garage, Yi-hyun throws the handcuff key off the roof to keep Andrew from opening the door. Andrew gets all sulky when Yi-hyun won't look at him since it's no fun killing someone if he can't see their eyes. Yi-hyun turns around, and has gone zombie. Andrew's second of surprise gives Yi-hyun time to grab him and take a chunk out of his neck. This looks like the end of the line for Andrew. Meanwhile, with nowhere else to go, Ha-sung goes to Sang-hee, who is struggling to read the tattoo on Joo-hyung's back. Sang-hee claims Joo-hyung fainted, but Ha-sung spots the bloody golf club nearby. When Joo-hyung wakes up, Sang-hee again hits him over the head with the club, but not before he pops the next pill he got from Yi-hyun's. Sang-hee orders the frightened Ha-sung to read the writing. They only have 10 tries to get the password right. In 501, young Ok manages to beat a hole in the door with the radio and reaches through to turn the handle from the outside. She grabs our couple's trusty bat and heads to elevator. The cleaning couple is still in there, but she only spares them enough attention to figure out where Andrew went. In the garage, SAE-bomb loads everyone into her car and drives to the perimeter where the soldiers open the barricade. SAE-bomb gets out and asks Taisuk for his gun so she can bring Yi-hyun out. Instead, Taisuk injects her with a sedative while the soldiers take the others from the car. SAE-bomb wakes briefly as they drive and sees people happily playing outside. When she next wakes, she sees Yi-hyun's face for a second before realizing it's Taisuk beside her bed. She surmises martial law has been over for a while, but they lied to keep them in quarantine. Taisuk doesn't respond but returns her phone. Yi-hyun gave it to Jungkook before they left. Despite her weakened state, SAE-bomb struggles to stand, saying she has to get to Yi-hyun. Taisuk knows they have a contract marriage and asks if Yi-hyun is worth all this. SAE-bomb says that the world is going to have to wait a bit because she needs Yi-hyun. If I lose him, I may really collapse. Taisuk says he has someone he'd like her to meet. He takes her to see his wife Young-in, who has been temporarily stabilized thanks to SAE-bomb's antibodies. SAE-bomb suggests a deal. She'll give him blood for the next dose for his wife if he sneaks her back to Yi-hyun before she's taken to the government research facility. When she gets back to her room, SAE-bomb finds a video from Yi-hyun on her phone. She cries to see his smiling face as he says that he didn't agree to marry her just for the apartment, but he didn't want her to think he was easy by admitting he liked her. After Seo-yoon and Jungkook make a brief cameo in his video, Yi-hyun promises to confess his feelings face-to-face once they get out safely. SAE-bomb replays the video, stifling sobs. As SAE-bomb donates her blood, she again watches the video Yi-hyun recorded for her. She calls his phone, but it goes to voicemail. SAE-bomb spots Seo-yoon in the hallway and ends up going with her to visit her mother. Seo-yoon's mother is lucid but doesn't look well. She tells Seo-yoon that she caught a cold and makes her keep her distance so she doesn't get sick before her surgery. Once Seo-yoon leaves the room, her mother says it's thanks to Seo-yoon's letter that she's been able to hold on for so long. She asks SAE-bomb to keep looking after her daughter and then urges SAE-bomb to leave. She can't hold back anymore and turns, straining against her restraints. Elsewhere, Taisuk interviews So-yoon about the state of the apartment complex. He asks how many are currently infected and wants details about those who died from the infection. Outside, SAE-bomb promises Seo-yoon that she and Yi-hyun will visit her after her surgery. When Seo-yoon guesses that her mother is infected, SAE-bomb assures her she'll get better. But Taisuk later tells SAE-bomb that Seo-yoon's mother probably won't last much longer. Taisuk hands SAE-bomb the last remaining vial of the treatment and observes that her antibody count is decreasing. They need this vial to create more of the treatment. When he says the commander is coming to take her to the lab, SAE-bomb asks if he's breaking his promise. Is not. He has SAE-bomb sneak out in military garb to evade the officers who've come to retrieve her. They arrive as Taisuk injects Young-in with the treatment and surround him with guns raised. Once he's finished, he turns himself in. On her way out, SAE-bomb slips into Seo-yoon's mother's room. She takes out the vial and injects her with the treatment. She hears a gun cock and turns to find Jisoo in the doorway, pointing her gun at her. She berates SAE-bomb for using the last of the cure, but SAE-bomb argues she can't be the only one with the antibodies. Yi-hyun has her, but Seo-yoon doesn't have anyone, which is why SAE-bomb decided to give Seo-yoon's mother the last dose. Jisoo sighs but switches clothes with SAE-bomb and sneaks her out. SAE-bomb gives her a quick hug and starts to leave, but Jisoo holds her back. When SAE-bomb hilariously thinks she wants another hug, Jisoo pushes her away and clarifies that people will be suspicious if she's unharmed. Although it was her idea, Jisoo gets all nervous but eventually lets SAE-bomb hit her in the face with the gun. While SAE-bomb escapes in the car Taisuk prepared for her, Taisuk gets an earful from the commander. Taisuk explains that SAE-bomb showed him there was a way to succeed without reducing people to statistics. When she arrives at the complex, SAE-bomb hands over the document Taisuk prepared for her and is let in. She tries contacting Yi-hyun via the radio Taisuk gave her. In case Yi-hyun is listening, SAE-bomb says she never realized how much he meant to her, and she'll do whatever it takes to get to him. At the command center, we get a peek into Taisuk's next plan. When Jisoo covers for SAE-bomb to the commander and says she likely went abroad, Taisuk intervenes. He reveals SAE bomb went back for Yi-hyun and then drops a key piece of intel. There's another antibody carrier in the apartment. He asks for authority to take over the operation. Meanwhile SAE bomb gets Hyun-kyung and Seminit to let her back in the apartment. When she asks about Yi-hyun, they go quiet. We flash back to the previous day when Yi-hyun bit Andrew. Young-ok watches terrified from the doorway. He calmly walks past her and down the stairs. Young-ok runs to Andrew and tries to pry the gun from his hand. Suddenly, he grabs her arm. Hyun-kyung spots Yi-hyun, covered in both his and Andrew's blood, as he goes back to his apartment. He lies exhausted on the couch but smiles when he looks at his and SAE bomb's picture on the wall. He wakes to Hyun-kyung standing over him, worried. In 601, Joo-hyung surreptitiously pops another next pill while Sang-hee and Ha-sung are busy trying to figure out his password. Moon-hee comes banging on the door, begging for Joo-hyung's help in saving her husband. Sang-hee and Ha-sung insist Joo-hyung isn't in and slam the door. When Ha-sung rounds the corner, Joo-hyung lunges at him and bites his arm, pretending to be infected. Sang-hee and Ha-sung go running into the hall and take refuge in Ha-sung's apartment. While Joo-hyung bangs on the door, Moon-hee approaches him. In 501, Yi-hyun wakes to Hyun-kyung and Seminit bickering over whether or not he's infected. Hyun-kyung has outfitted her brother in a catcher's mask in case he goes feral, but he claims his thirst has lessened. Yi-hyun anxiously asks about SAE bomb and is relieved to hear she and the others made it out. He divulges that he bit Andrew and says he needs to catch him because if he's still alive, he'll be even more dangerous now. The siblings accompany him Yi-hyun to the roof, but Andrew is gone. In 601, Joo-hyung watches the news. Service has been turned back on, while Moon-hee feeds Sekyu in the other room. Yi-hyun and the siblings pay Joo-hyung a visit, but he says he hasn't seen Andrew or Young-ok. He keeps up the lie that he's infected, but of course, Yi-hyun knows the truth. Yi-hyun explains that not everyone who takes next gets infected. He then pushes his way inside to check on the cleaning couple. Yi-hyun almost goes zombie in the presence of the bleeding Sekyu but he manages to hold on. He correctly surmises that Joo-hyung is keeping the couple there in case he turns and needs blood. Yi-hyun warns him not to step out of line or he'll lock him in the basement. When Joo-hyung follows Yi-hyun out of the apartment, Moon-hee swipes the pills and feeds one to her husband. Yi-hyun and the siblings next stop by Hak-jae and Sung-shils. Hak-jae insists they're fine but asks them to look after Dong-hyun and tell him to come home. Yi-hyun warns him about Andrew and then heads for the elevator with the siblings. A very disheveled Young-ok steps out of the elevator and warns the siblings to stay away from Yi-hyun. She then shares that Andrew is dead. She repeatedly bashed his head in with the bat after he raised the gun. But she still thinks his body is on the rooftop and refuses to believe Yi-hyun that the body is gone. When she goes up and sees for herself, she convinces herself Yi-hyun hid the body. Downstairs, Yi-hyun leaves his sidekicks inside while he goes into the garage. He spots Dong-hyun in his car, bloody and crying. He's been bitten. Seminit is amusingly afraid of the infected and wants to keep Dong-hyun out. Yi-hyun argues Dong-hyun has a better chance of holding out if he's with his family, so Dong-hyun returns home in tears and apologizes to his father. Hak-jae welcomes him back with open arms. After taking the pills, Sekyu feels better. He suggests pulling out the knife, which seems like a bad idea. Moon-hee gives him another pill, and he says that they shouldn't leave this place empty-handed after everything. Let's take this apartment. And the bad ideas keep coming. Moon-hee lures Joo-hyung into the room. Sekyu slices Joo-hyung's arm, but that's all the damage he can do before Joo-hyung escapes. He runs to beg for Sang-hee's help, even offering to give her his money. That gets her to open the door a crack, but when he reaches his bloody hand in, she slams the door on him. Joo-hyung then runs to Yi-hyun for help. When Yi-hyun questions Moon-hee, she lies that Joo-hyung gave them the pills and said they'd heal the wound. Yi-hyun is sick of Joo-hyung's drama and takes him to the gym, but he lets him take his laptop. Sang-hee stares at the laptop intently as Yi-hyun and his sidekicks lead Joo-hyung to the elevator. Young-ok steps out and demands to know where they're taking Joo-hyung. She shoots Yi-hyun one hell of a glare when he warns her to watch herself or he'll quarantine her next. In 601, Moon-hee and Sekyu go through all the fancy jewelry and cash in the apartment while discussing how they could kill Joo-hyung and make it look like a zombie did it. Moon-hee gives Sekyu another pill because of the pain. He wonders why he's so thirsty. Back in 501, Hyun-kyung thanks Yi-hyun for staying behind. She knows he did it partly to look after everyone. Yi-hyun sends them home, saying he'll rest before looking for Andrew again. Hyun-kyung wants to help, but Yi-hyun admits he's still struggling a lot and could be a danger to her. While cleaning the apartment, Yi-hyun finds the radio, but it seems to be broken. Even so, he turns it on to ask SAE-bomb if she's well and say he misses her. We jump back to the present, and SAE-bomb is elated to hear that Yi-hyun is still alive and okay. Meanwhile, Sang-hee tries to sneak into the gym office to steal the laptop, but Joo-hyung manages to grab her. Young-ok pops in and offers a deal. She'll break his handcuffs if he helps her get rid of Yi-hyun. Even Joo-hyung thinks she's lost it, but he looks tempted. From his apartment, Yi-hyun hears a woman scream. He runs into the hall where Joo-hyung is holding a knife to Sang-hee's throat. Young Ok sits on the floor and suggests they kill everyone and pin it on the infected. Yi-hyun yells that they're the true monsters here. Joo-hyun cuts Sang-hee's arm, flinging the blood at Yi-hyun before shoving her toward him. Yi-hyun manages to resist the thirst long enough to push Sang-hee into the stairwell for safety. Young Ok's laughter follows him as he runs back to his apartment. While Joo-hyun bangs on the door, Yi-hyun hides under a blanket to try to regain control. But his hand is covered in Sang-hee's blood, and his pupils constrict. Se-bomb arrives during this madness, first running into an unhinged Young Ok in the hall as she says that she totally deserves to be Rep. A-bomb placates her and sarcastically says she'll vote for her. Then, she heads for Joo-hyun as he bangs on the door and screams for Yi-hyun. He tries to pretend he's infected, but Se-bomb's well-placed kick between his legs cuts that short. Se-bomb rushes inside and finds Yi-hyun huddled on the couch, fighting the change. She rubs his back and talks to him, assuring him that she'll stay by his side. "Stay with me," she says. Yi-hyun finally starts to calm down and turns to look at her in amazement. She tells him she's okay no matter what state he's in and kisses him. They hold on to each other for a while. Meanwhile, Taisuk and Jisoo head to the complex. She's surprised to hear that their only evidence Seminit has the antibodies is anecdotal. So-yoon heard from Hyun-kyung that his wound never changed. In 602, Ha-sung ignores Sang-hee banging on his door and stares at his text to So-yoon. Now that he's lost her, he misses her and realizes how much she meant to him. She picks up when he calls, but only to tell him not to call again. He quickly gets over his heartbreak and guesses he'll settle for Sang-hee who still wants him. They get into Joo-hyun's Bitcoin account, but their celebratory expressions fall when they see his in the red. According to the news, Dong-hyun and his parents are watching. Stock markets are crashing globally due to the virus. With all this coverage, the family is hopeful for a cure and that someone will soon save them. So they're ecstatic when soldiers break down their door and lead them out. Seminit is taken away on a stretcher while he and Hyun-kyung swear he's never bitten anyone. Taisuk checks the bite on his neck, it's not infected. He radios that he found the carrier and then orders Jisoo take Yi-hyun and Se-bomb to the dorms. The cleaning couple flips out when soldiers burst into their apartment and drag them away from their recently acquired possessions. Meanwhile, Yi-hyun and Se-bomb leave Joo-hyun and Young Ok on the roof. They decide to move Sehun's body back to his apartment, so Yi-hyun goes to open the door to 1501. Yep, it's Andrew with the gun. Yi-hyun refuses to call for Se-bomb and instead tries to wrestle the gun away. Se-bomb hears a gunshot and finds Andrew holding a gun to Yi-hyun's head. He orders her to drop the gun, but Yi-hyun yells for her to shoot as he holds his stomach. Se-bomb lowers the gun, and shoots herself in the arm. Newly infected Andrew quickly turns and advances on her, but Yi-hyun shoots him in the head before he can reach her. Se-bomb runs to Yi-hyun and cradles his head. He's barely conscious and tells her to keep being the good cop. Yi-hyun's head drops. Se-bomb holds him close and wails. We cut to an unspecified amount of time later. Young Ok and Joo-hyun stand trial for their crimes. At the dorms, we see that Sung-young is still alive. At the complex, a healthy Se-yoon runs around the grounds and into Se-bomb's arms. An equally healthy Yi-hyun wraps his arms around Se-bomb from behind. Se-yoon says she has somewhere to be, leaving the couple alone. They reminisce about last year's lockdown, and Se-bomb asks when Yi-hyun started liking her. Yi-hyun says he always has and even became a cop because of her. She nudges him, "So are you happy now?" Yi-hyun replies, "Of course, as long as I'm with you." They both look happy as they playfully race home.